My name is Nathan, and I'm 28 years old. For most of my adult life, I've been the quiet one in the family. Not because I lacked opinions or confidence. I just learned early on that in our household, silence was safer than speaking up. I grew up with my mom, my older sister Lily, and my grandma, all packed into a small but sturdy house my grandfather left behind before he passed. Dad wasn't in the picture after I turned 8, and while that shook me up more than I let on, I learned to deal with it. Lily, on the other hand, took his absence as some kind of torch to carry, like she had to become the golden child in his place. And Mom, she clung to Lily like she was all she had left. Me? I was just there, quiet, reliable, invisible when it was convenient. As I got older, I did what I thought was right. I worked hard, kept my head down, and made sure I didn't cause any trouble. College wasn't really an option. We didn't have the money, and no one encouraged me to apply anyway. Instead, I picked up part-time jobs straight out of high school. Warehouse gigs, odd shifts at gas stations, deliveries. I kept moving, always working, never asking for anything. My family never offered help either, but they were more than happy to accept mine whenever bills piled up or Lily wanted something she couldn't afford. And that happened often. Lily was the type who floated through life like the world owed her a parade. She'd switch majors 3 times, then drop out, and take a break, while I picked up double shifts. Every time she cried about rent or car payments, Mom would guilt-trip me into being a good brother. And I was. I always was. Even when I had to sleep on a futon in the corner of the living room so Lily could have her own room when she moved back in just for a few months. Even when I worked through the flu because someone had to pay the water bill and Grandma's medication in the same week. I never complained. Never snapped. Not out loud. But the quiet kind of resentment, the kind that builds drip by drip, is the worst kind. You start out thinking you're just doing the right thing. Then one day you realize you've disappeared completely from your own life. You're just a paycheck and a spare pair of hands. When Lily got pregnant, it was chaos at first. Crying, shouting, the usual storm. But by the end of that week, Mom was gushing about becoming a grandma, and Lily was already browsing Pinterest for nursery ideas. I didn't say much. I congratulated her, offered to help if she needed anything, and went back to work. I figured maybe this time, things would shift. Maybe motherhood would humble her a bit, bring her back down to earth. But instead, it only made the spotlight on her shine even brighter. The baby shower was held at our house. They went all out. Pink balloons, streamers, flower walls, a whole table dedicated to cupcakes and treats. I chipped in for the decorations and catered food. Quietly, of course. They didn't ask, but I knew Mom couldn't cover it all, and I didn't want Lily stressing during her pregnancy. I wired the money, stayed out of the way, and figured that would be enough. The day of the shower, I showed up a little late after a long shift. I was tired, my clothes still smelled faintly of oil and cardboard, but I cleaned up the best I could. I brought a gift, nothing flashy, just a solid baby carrier I knew would last. When I walked in, no one really greeted me. A few people nodded. My mom was showing off the cake to one of Lily's friends, and Lily barely glanced over before turning back to her crowd of bridesmaid-looking guests. I didn't expect a grand welcome. I was used to being overlooked. But what got me wasn't the cold shoulder, it was the laughter. It started when I walked past a small group near the kitchen. One of Lily's friends whispered something, then laughed behind her hand. Another said loud enough for me to hear, "He's cute in a, like, scrappy rescue dog kind of way." I paused but kept walking. I figured maybe I misheard. I wasn't there to start problems. Later, I overheard my own mother talking to some older relatives. "Nathan? Oh, he just works a lot. Always busy. He doesn't really get the whole family thing." Someone chuckled and said, "Well, some people are just better off on their own. He's always been a bit distant, hasn't he?" I stood there, gripping my paper plate, watching the frosting on my cupcake tilt while my stomach churned. I hadn't spoken yet. I hadn't done anything. But somehow, I was still the odd one out. Still the punchline in a house I helped keep from collapsing more times than they knew. When I handed Lily my gift, she smiled politely and said, "Thanks. I think I already have one, though." She passed it off to her friend without opening it. 10 minutes later, I heard her tell someone she wasn't expecting anything fancy from Nathan anyway. That was it. That was the moment. I didn't make a scene. Didn't flip a table or shout or throw the gift back at her. I just quietly placed my plate in the trash, nodded to my grandmother, the only one who gave me a sincere smile that day, and left. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't say anything at all. They didn't text me that night. Or the next. No one asked if I was okay. No one noticed that the guy who'd been helping with bills, groceries, rent, and more, without ever being asked, had gone completely silent. 2 weeks later, my mom called me in a panic. "Nathan," she said, her voice already raised, "we got something in the mail. From the bank. About the mortgage. Something about missed payments and what's going on?" I didn't answer right away. I just stared at the screen, then slowly said, "I think you should check whose name the utilities and mortgage are under, and how long they've been paid through." There was silence, then more frantic questions. I hung up before answering any of them. That was the beginning of the unraveling, and they were about to learn, in the harshest way, just how much they'd taken for granted. But I'll tell you what happened next, when you're ready. In the days that followed the baby shower, my phone blew up. Not from concern or apology, just noise. At first, it was my mom, confused and accusatory. "Why would we be getting letters from the bank?" she snapped in a voicemail. "This house has always been fine." Then came the texts. "Did you cancel something? What's going on? Did you mess with the accounts?" I ignored them. I wasn't ready. The truth was, for the past 3 years, I had been quietly paying the mortgage. When Grandma's health declined and her fixed income couldn't cover both her meds and the house, I stepped in. At first, it was just a few $100 here and there. But over time, I took over the full payment. I had set it all up through an automated plan under my name. The deed still listed my late grandfather, with everything pending probate that no one had bothered to finish. They didn't want the responsibility. They just wanted to live there. Utilities? I paid those too. Especially after Mom fell behind when Lily moved back in and Grandma started needing round-the-clock care. I had the login info for all the accounts. I knew the passwords. I'd been handling it all silently, and they'd grown so comfortable with that silence, they mistook it for absence, for weakness. Now, with the payments suddenly frozen and no warning, reality was finally knocking at their door. But instead of acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, I had been doing more than they realized, they went on the attack. Mom left another voicemail that nearly made me laugh out loud. "I can't believe you're doing this. To your own family. We're going to get evicted. Why would you just stop without telling anyone?" The gall. Like she expected a courtesy notice before I pulled my lifeline out from under their feet. Then Lily got involved. She texted me a long paragraph that read more like a lecture than a message. "If you had issues, you should have said something. This is supposed to be a happy time for me, and you're ruining it. I'm pregnant, Nathan. Do you even care what this stress is doing to me?" That last part stuck with me. Do you even care? I stared at those words, rereading them until the letters blurred. The same girl who never thanked me, who called me just to help during a Christmas party 2 years ago when her boyfriend asked what I did. Now she was accusing me of not caring. And just like that, any trace of guilt I had about pulling away completely vanished. Still, I didn't respond. I wasn't ready to make my move yet. I focused on work. On myself. For once, I let their chaos exist without me running to clean it up. And it showed. Within days, the power bill was overdue. Their Wi-Fi got cut off. The gas company left a final notice on the door. I knew because Grandma called. Not to yell, but gently. "Nathan, sweetheart, I know you've been helping more than anyone knew. I'm sorry they never saw it. I just want you to know. I see you. I always have." Her words hit me harder than all the others combined. I offered to pay for her medication directly. Nothing more. I made sure her account stayed current and that the pharmacy had her prescriptions ready. But I left the house itself to crumble under its own weight. A week later, I was ambushed at work. I was in the back unloading inventory when one of my coworkers said, "Hey man, there's a lady out front asking for you. Says she's your mom." I sighed, wiped my hands on my jeans, and headed out. Sure enough, there she was, standing by the counter, arms folded, eyes scanning every part of the store like she was above being there. When she saw me, she didn't even say hello. "We need to talk. Now." I glanced at my manager, who gave me a sympathetic look and nodded toward the break room. The moment the door closed, she let loose. "You need to fix this. Now. The bank says we're behind on 3 months of payments. They're talking about foreclosure. Your sister's crying every night. Your grandma's confused, and this is your fault. You can't just abandon your family like this." I didn't yell. I didn't even raise my voice. I just said, calmly, "I didn't abandon anyone. I stopped carrying a load none of you ever asked about until it disappeared. She blinked, caught off guard. I paid the mortgage. I paid the water, gas, internet. I paid the property taxes when you forgot. I paid for Grandma's insulin. I covered Lily's rent when she moved back in and stopped working for 6 months. I've been doing it all, Mom. Quietly. Without a single thank you. Without anyone offering to pitch in. And the one time, I stop. I'm suddenly the villain. Her face twisted like she'd been slapped. That's not fair, she snapped. You never said no before. Exactly. That was the problem. You all built your comfort on the assumption that I'd always just show up, I said. Even when you ignored me. Mocked me. Forgot my birthday 3 years in a row. Laughed behind my back at the baby shower. Do you know how humiliating that was? To hear my own mother say, I don't understand family, while I'm the only one actually keeping this one standing. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. I didn't ask for applause, I continued. But I won't let you shame me for finally stepping away. She tried a new tactic, tears. You're breaking this family apart, Nathan. I looked her dead in the eye. This family was broken long before I stopped paying the bills. You just didn't notice until the lights turned off. I walked out of the break room before she could respond. The fallout from that conversation spread like wildfire. Lily posted some vague nonsense online about being betrayed by people closest to you and how not everyone deserves a seat at the table. Her friends flooded the comments with pity and stay strong, queen garbage, completely unaware she was crying in a house she never paid a dime toward. Mom tried to guilt Grandma into talking to me, but Grandma had already made up her mind. She told me on the phone, they don't deserve to lean on you anymore, sweetheart. Let them learn. And learn they would. Because just when they thought it couldn't get worse, just when the eviction notice arrived in a red envelope with an official stamp, I made a quiet phone call that would tip the scales completely. I didn't make that phone call out of spite. At least, not at first. I called because I needed clarity. For years, I'd shouldered the responsibilities of that house without complaint, but now that the illusion had shattered, I wanted to know exactly where I stood. So I contacted the probate attorney who'd handled my grandfather's estate, or tried to, anyway, before everything got delayed and brushed under the rug. The attorney remembered me. Ah, Nathan, you were the one asking about the back taxes a few years ago, right? Yeah, I said. And I'm the one who paid them. There was a pause on the other end. Interesting, because as far as the records show, you were the only one who ever followed up. I explained the situation, how the house was still in limbo, how no one had finalized the inheritance, and how I'd been paying everything without being on any legal document except the utility accounts. Well, he said after a moment, the will your grandfather left, he named you as the primary heir. Not your mother, not your sister. You. I froze. What? It's all in the paperwork. The house, the land, everything. It was supposed to pass to you, but the estate was never officially closed. All it takes is one court visit and some paperwork. If you want to finalize it now, I can have the documents drawn up by the end of the week. I sat there in stunned silence, phone to my ear, while the world around me suddenly tilted. All these years, all the bills, the late nights, the exhaustion, and the house had been meant for me all along. They never told me, I muttered. My mom. Lily. No one said anything. I'm not surprised, he replied gently. It's not uncommon. Especially when family politics get messy. That night, I barely slept. Not because I was conflicted, but because something finally clicked. The years of dismissal, the quiet jokes at my expense, the way they never included me in decisions about the house, they knew. Or at least, Mom knew. She must have seen the will. She must have known I was the one Grandpa trusted with the house. And instead of telling me, instead of honoring his wishes, she just let me pay and pay and pay, while treating me like a second-class guest in my own home. It was betrayal. Cold. Calculated. And it ran deeper than anything I'd expected. The next morning, I went to the county clerk's office. I submitted the paperwork, signed the necessary forms, and scheduled a court date. It was quiet. Simple. Unceremonious. But when the judge banged the gavel and declared the transfer complete, I walked out with legal ownership of the property. That house, the one I grew up in, the one I'd fought to keep standing, was finally mine. 2 days later, I drove over. I didn't text, didn't warn them. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw Lily's car, still dented on the side, just like it had been for months. Mom's car was parked crooked, half on the lawn. The porch light was off even though it was mid-afternoon, and a stack of unopened mail clung to the mailbox with a rubber band. I could feel the tension in the air before I even stepped out of the car. The door was unlocked. Inside, the living room was a mess. Baby stuff everywhere, crumpled receipts on the table, a half-eaten bowl of cereal by the couch. Lily sat in a recliner, scrolling on her phone with a deep frown. She looked up and rolled her eyes. "Oh, you." I ignored her and walked past, heading toward the kitchen where Mom stood at the sink, washing something with sharp, angry movements. She didn't turn when she heard me. "If you're here to lecture us again, don't bother. We're already drowning, thanks to you." I dropped a manila envelope onto the counter. "What's this?" she asked, drying her hands and opening it. She skimmed the first page, then the second, and then her face paled. This can't be real," she whispered. "It's the court order," I said calmly. "The house is legally mine now. Grandpa left it to me. The will was never finalized, but I just took care of that." Mom's lips parted, but no sound came out. "You knew, didn't you?" I asked, voice low and steady. "You saw the will. You knew it wasn't yours to claim. But you let me pay for everything anyway. You lied by omission. And now you're standing in a house that doesn't belong to you." Lily stormed in behind me, voice sharp and rising. "You're kicking out a pregnant woman? Seriously? What kind of brother does that?" I turned to her slowly. "The kind who's been treated like a wallet for 6 years while being told he's not really part of the family." She laughed bitterly. "So this is revenge? You think this makes you some kind of hero?" "No," I said, stepping forward. "This makes me the owner, and I've got decisions to make." The air went still. Mom sat down hard on a chair, holding the paperwork with trembling hands. Lily kept ranting, saying things like, "I'll go to court," and "You're heartless," but none of it landed. None of it mattered anymore. I looked at both of them and saw it clearly for the first time. Not just the betrayal, but the pattern. I had always been the safety net, the invisible support, the shadow they could lean on and step over at the same time. But I wasn't that person anymore. I left the papers on the counter. "You have until the end of the week." And then I walked out, the door closing behind me with a finality that echoed through the house. But what came next? That's where things really started to unravel. After I left the house that day, I parked 2 blocks away and just sat in my car. No music, no calls, just me and my own thoughts swirling in silence. I should have felt triumphant, vindicated. I had done the responsible thing. I protected what Grandpa left me. I stood up for myself, and I finally confronted the people who had taken advantage of me for years. But instead, all I felt was hollow. It hit me harder than I expected, the weight of what I'd done. Not the ownership part, not even the eviction warning. It was the silence, the realization that my family had never really been a family. At least, not to me. For them, family meant access, convenience, someone to fix things when they fell apart. When I went home that night, I stared at the walls of my apartment, the one-bedroom place I'd lived in quietly for 4 years while still paying for the mortgage of the family home I wasn't welcome in. I'd kept it modest, second-hand couch, small dining table, a few framed photos of Grandpa and me on a fishing trip. No one had ever visited. Not once. I sat at the edge of my bed and scrolled through my messages. Nothing from Mom. Nothing from Lily. Not even a fake apology. Just radio silence. And for a brief second, I wondered if I had gone too far. If I'd let bitterness guide me. Then I opened my budgeting app and looked at the last few months of transactions. Nearly 70% of my take-home pay had been going to support them. 70%. I wasn't bitter. I was just done bleeding for people who'd never even noticed I was hurting. Still, that hollow feeling lingered. The next morning, I got a call from the assisted care facility I had been eyeing for Grandma. "Hi Nathan, we have a spot opening up at the end of next month. If you're still interested, we'd love to meet with your grandmother and go over the details." I scheduled the appointment immediately. If I was going to cut myself loose from that house, I had to make sure Grandma was safe first. She was the only one who never mocked me, never asked for anything. She always offered what little she had, even if it was just a warm smile or a cup of tea when I looked tired. But even that didn't go smoothly. When I called to tell her about the opening and ask if she wanted to visit the place, her voice sounded nervous. Quiet. "I'd love to, sweetheart, but your mother's been acting strange lately. Ever since you left that paperwork. She barely speaks to me, and she hides the mail when it comes. I don't think she wants me going anywhere." I felt my jaw tighten. She's what? I'm okay, Grandma said quickly, as if to soften the blow. But I can tell she's angry. And Lily hasn't spoken a word to me since you came by. I think they blame me for something. Of course they did. I hadn't even considered it, that they'd try to isolate her as a way to punish me. But it made sense. Grandma had always been the closest to me, and now that I was holding the power, they needed a scapegoat inside the house. That night, I sat down with a legal pad and started writing everything out. Not emotionally, just practically. What needed to happen next? Who needed to be notified? What resources I needed to line up? I called the care facility again, asked about transportation services. I even emailed the attorney to ask about securing the property and what my rights were as the owner if the residents refused to leave. I didn't want to kick them out onto the street, but I couldn't leave Grandma in that toxic environment. And I couldn't keep pouring time and energy into people who thought of me as nothing but an ATM with a pulse. And yet, even as I planned the next steps, the emotional toll weighed me down. At work, I found myself zoning out during meetings. I dropped a box of product in the stockroom one afternoon and just stood there, staring at the broken glass until a coworker snapped me out of it. My appetite was shot. I'd sit with food in front of me for 20 minutes and barely touch it. It wasn't the money, or even the betrayal. It was the grief. The grief of realizing your family never really saw you. That for them, love had terms. Respect had conditions. And loyalty was expected, not earned. I didn't cry, not really. But one night, I was organizing a drawer and came across an old Polaroid from when I was 10. It was me and Lily on the front porch. She was holding a popsicle and grinning. I had my arm around her like I was the proud big brother, even though she was 2 years older. I stared at it for a long time, thumb tracing the edges. How did we go from that to this? The next morning, I woke up early and drove to the house again. Not to fight, not to lecture, just to see. I parked across the street and watched for a while. It was quiet, too quiet. Curtains drawn, no movement. After about 20 minutes, I saw Mom step outside with a trash bag. She looked thinner, frazzled. She dumped the bag into the bin and went back in without noticing me. That was the moment I decided. I wasn't going to keep circling them, hoping they'd finally treat me with decency. I wasn't going to wait for gratitude that would never come. I was going to secure Grandma's future. I was going to finalize the transition of the property. And after that, I was going to sell it. Let them figure out what real family means without me. But before I could make my final moves, something unexpected happened. Something that changed everything and sent the situation spiraling into dangerous territory. Things started shifting the moment I committed to walking away. It didn't happen all at once, more like slow, deliberate steps after years of standing still. The first came that weekend. I took Grandma to visit the assisted living facility. I picked her up myself, making sure to call ahead so Mom couldn't interfere. When I arrived at the house, Grandma was already waiting at the curb in her sweater and walking shoes, her small overnight bag sitting beside her. She gave me a tired smile, eyes a little misty. "You ready?" I asked, offering my arm. "More than you know," she whispered. I helped her into the car, and we drove in silence for a bit. The tension didn't fully leave her shoulders until we pulled out of the neighborhood. Only then did she relax, like she had been holding her breath for weeks. She told me that things inside the house had grown colder. That Mom and Lily barely spoke to her unless they needed something. That they tiptoed around her, not out of care, but like she was a burden they hadn't figured out how to get rid of. It made my chest tighten with anger, but I didn't let it show. The facility, by contrast, was warm, bright, cheerful. They had a community garden, a reading room, even a weekly shuttle to town for shopping. When we toured her potential apartment, a cozy corner unit with a small balcony and a view of the trees, she ran her fingers over the windowsill and said, almost to herself, "He would have loved this." She meant Grandpa. We stayed for lunch and met some of the staff. By the end of the visit, Grandma turned to me and said, "If you can make this work, I'd be happy here." That was all I needed. I paid the deposit out of my savings that same day. It was the most expensive decision I'd made all year, but the most satisfying one too. I gave the staff her medical history, dietary needs, prescriptions, and an emergency contact number, mine. And for the first time in months, maybe even years, I felt like I was doing something for me. Something right. The next step was the house. I met with a real estate agent the following Monday. She was efficient, sharp, and didn't bat an eye when I told her it was still occupied, Not for long, I added. She walked the property with me, took notes, and said, "It's got good bones. Some updates needed, sure, but this location? Easily 6 figures. You'll want to get them out soon, though. Can't sell it with a circus going on inside." I nodded. "I'm working on it. Legally, I couldn't force an immediate eviction unless they caused damage or refused to leave after official notice. So I filed the paperwork, 30 days to vacate, and made sure it was hand-delivered with a witness present. No loopholes. No excuses. At work, things picked up too. I'd been grinding quietly for years. The guy who always took the late shifts, the holidays, the double duty when someone called out. I never asked for recognition. But after my store manager saw how I'd handled the property situation, calm, methodical, not getting emotional even when ambushed, he called me into his office. "You ever thought about moving up?" he asked. "We're opening a new branch across town next quarter. You've got leadership material. People respect you. You don't cause drama." That last part made me smirk. "I'm interested," I said simply. He nodded. "I'll put your name in for assistant manager. It's a bump in pay and hours, but you'd be running your own team. Think about it." I didn't have to. I took the offer 2 days later. With the promotion came better income, not life-changing, but enough to feel real breathing room. I updated my apartment, added a proper desk for the first time, and replaced my lumpy mattress with one that didn't feel like a punishment. I even got a gym membership and started going 3 times a week, just to move and clear my head. Every small change felt like a middle finger to the version of me who used to come home exhausted and broke after covering someone else's bills. And as for Lily and Mom, oh, they noticed. Mom left voicemails, now long ones. Apologizing, sort of. "I didn't realize how much you were doing," she'd say. Or, "I never meant to make you feel left out." But it always circled back to the same thing. "Can we talk? Can you reconsider? Can we figure something out?" Lily tried a different tactic. She showed up at my job one day, pregnant, belly visible now, arms folded across her chest like a shield. "I know we've had problems," she said, standing by the registers. "But you don't have to ruin us. That house is the only thing we have, and you don't even need it. You live in some crappy little apartment and work retail. Why take this from us?" I looked her dead in the eye. "Because it's mine. Grandpa left it to me. And instead of honoring that, you all used me, until I stopped being useful." Her face twisted in disbelief, like she couldn't comprehend that I was saying it out loud now, that I wasn't the silent mule anymore. I walked away, let my coworkers escort her out. A week later, I moved Grandma into her new home. She cried when we wheeled her inside, not from sadness, but relief. The staff greeted her like family. Her room was filled with light. I stocked her fridge with her favorite yogurts and left a small framed photo of her and Grandpa on the dresser. That night, I slept better than I had in months. And then came the final letter, a certified copy of the eviction notice stamped and delivered. 30 days. That was the legal grace period. But I knew they wouldn't go quietly, especially because I'd just learned something new, something about the house's value that changed everything. And the second I confirmed it, I knew exactly how I'd deliver the final blow. About 2 weeks after Grandma settled into her new place, I got a call from my real estate agent. I had just finished locking up the store for the night and was walking to my car when her name lit up my screen. "Hey, Nathan," she said, a little breathless. "You're going to want to sit down." "Why? Did the roof collapse?" She laughed. "No. Better. You remember how I said the location was good?" "Yeah. Well, I just got off the phone with a developer. Apparently, the city council approved plans to rezone that entire block. They're turning it into a mixed-use development area. Retail on the bottom, condos on top. Your house? It's sitting right on a planned access road. They're estimating property value in that pocket is about to double, maybe even triple." I stopped walking, hand tightening on my keys. "You serious?" "Dead serious. And get this, that same developer might be interested in buying now, before the rezoning spikes the tax bracket. You'd be in a perfect position to negotiate. But you've got to get them out of there first." My heart was pounding. For years, that house had been a weight around my neck, a place filled with tension and bitterness and thankless responsibility. But now it was leverage. Not just emotionally, financially. It was power. I could sell the house for a life-changing amount, pay off my debts, put a down payment on a better apartment, maybe even buy my own place, start something new on my terms. Or I could lease it back to the developer, take equity, ride the project up, Options I'd never had before. All from the one place where I was never seen as anything but a spare wallet. I called the attorney again the next day, asked about accelerating the eviction, if they leave the house in poor condition, or if they refuse to comply with the notice. You can file for an expedited order, he explained. But it's cleaner if they leave willingly. I nodded, though I knew already they weren't leaving willingly. Still, I had to try one more time. If not for them, then for Grandma's peace of mind. So I wrote a letter. Not a cold legal one. A real one. 3 paragraphs. Typed. Direct. Mom, Lily, as you're aware, the house is no longer yours. I have honored every legal step. I've paid every overdue bill. I've supported this home and its residents long after I stopped being welcomed in it. But this ends now. You have 2 options. Leave quietly within the next 10 days, and I'll give you each a small relocation stipend. No strings, just enough to get on your feet. Or stay past the deadline, and I will file for forced removal through the court. You'll leave with nothing. And a record. You don't have to like me, but you will respect what I've done and what I'm capable of. Nathan. I mailed it. Registered. Tracked. And then I waited. During that wait, things in my life started accelerating. Almost like the universe was finally making room for me. I got confirmation that my assistant manager promotion came with a transfer to the newer store, closer to my apartment, better hours, better team. I said yes without hesitation. I enrolled in 2 online courses, one in real estate fundamentals and another in small business finance. For the first time in years, I had mental energy again. I wasn't just surviving. I was building. Even socially, things changed. A coworker, Sarah, started chatting with me more during shifts. She noticed I brought lunch from home one day and said, "You cook? That's rare." We laughed. She joked about how she burned instant noodles. Then we had lunch again the next day, and the next. It was nothing serious yet, but it was something. Then, 10 days after I sent the letter, the storm came. I got home from work and found my apartment door covered in sticky notes. Angry, childish ones. "You're disgusting. Rot in hell. You betrayed your family. Hope the money keeps you warm." I peeled them off one by one, heart oddly calm. I recognized Lily's handwriting. Some were from Mom, too. She had this dramatic cursive that always looped the Y in my name like she was signing a yearbook. They weren't subtle, but they were a gift. Because tucked between those notes, possibly by accident, was a receipt. Folded. From a pawn shop. I opened it, and my stomach turned. It listed a sale. Dated 2 days ago. Jewelry. Rings, earrings, 1 pearl necklace, under Lily's name. The items matched Grandma's heirlooms. I'd seen them in a glass box on her dresser just a week before when helping her unpack at the facility. I called Grandma immediately. "Do you still have your jewelry box?" I asked gently. Silence. Then, "Oh, I hadn't even thought to look. I assumed it was packed." She paused. "Wait, no? It wasn't with the rest." "Nathan, you don't think." "I'm afraid I do." That was the last straw. This wasn't just entitlement. It wasn't just manipulation. It was theft. From a woman who had shown nothing but kindness. From her own daughter and granddaughter. They crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And I suddenly had more than just legal leverage. I had criminal leverage. I contacted the pawn shop. Confirmed the transaction. Took down the clerk's name. Then I filed a police report. Not because I wanted them arrested, but because I wanted it documented. Filed. Logged. Something I could slide across a judge's desk if it came to that. By the end of that week, I had 3 powerful things. Legal ownership of the property. An imminent buyer offering well above market price. Evidence of criminal misconduct by the current occupants. And that's when I made the final move. I scheduled a meeting. Neutral ground. A quiet booth in a diner across town. I texted Mom and Lily the time and location. I didn't say what it was about. They showed up. Late. Lily looked angry. Mom looked tired. Before either could speak, I slid a folder across the table. Inside were 3 things. A copy of the police report, the developer's offer letter, and a printed screenshot of the eviction deadline. Mom paled. Lily scoffed. "This is pathetic." "No," I said. "This is real. You've got 72 hours left. I can press charges. Or you can walk away with a check. One time. No second chances." They stared at me like they didn't recognize who I was. And honestly, they didn't. Because the Nathan they remembered, the quiet one, the easy one, the invisible one, was gone. I had power now, and I was about to use it. They didn't take the deal. Of course they didn't. After everything, the warnings, the notices, the letter, the police report, they still thought they could win. Lily rolled her eyes and shoved the folder back across the diner table. "We're not signing anything," she said, her voice loud enough to make the couple in the next booth glance over. "You think just because you got lucky with some zoning loophole and a dead man's will, you're the king of the world now?" Mom was quieter, but her tone was even colder. "You'd really do this to your own family? Sell the house out from under your sister? Evict your mother? After all we've done for you?" I didn't flinch. I just folded the folder back up and tucked it under my arm. "All right," I said, standing. "See you in court." I walked away without looking back. The next morning, I went to the courthouse with every document I'd prepared. The will, the deed transfer, the payment records, photos of the pawn receipt, a copy of the eviction notice, the filed police report. By the time I was done presenting everything to the clerk and the magistrate, I was granted expedited removal. An officer would be assigned to serve them the final 48-hour notice. If they weren't out, they'd be forcibly removed. But I didn't stop there. The pawn shop incident had opened another door, and I planned to walk right through it. With Grandma's permission, I contacted the shop owner directly. I explained the situation, provided the police report, and asked if he could hold the items until we resolved the theft. He was hesitant, but after speaking with the detective assigned to the case, he agreed. I then had a lawyer, a friend of a coworker, draft a civil complaint. Theft of property, emotional distress, damages for fraud and deception. It wasn't meant to bankrupt them, but it sent a message. You took something sacred, and you're not walking away untouched. Meanwhile, back at the house, things were unraveling fast. Lily posted a long, dramatic rant on Facebook about toxic brothers and jealous men who think money makes them better than blood. She painted herself as a victim, pregnant, scared, abandoned. Comments poured in from people who didn't know the full story. "Stay strong, girl. You're doing amazing, sweetie. Cut him off. You don't need that kind of negativity." But then, something shifted. One comment stood out. "Wait, isn't that your grandma's house? The one your brother's been paying for? Didn't he cover your rent for like a year?" Someone else chimed in. "I thought your mom said he was the one who paid the mortgage." Then another. "Didn't you pawn your grandma's necklace?" I didn't reply. I didn't have to. Word spread. Quietly at first, then steadily. The people who mattered, family friends, church acquaintances, even her old high school best friend, started backing away. No more sympathy, just silence. And then came the eviction day. I didn't go in person. I sent my lawyer. They resisted, of course, refused to open the door. But the officers were patient. By hour 4, Lily was crying on the porch, arms wrapped around a laundry basket of clothes. Mom stood beside her, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, clutching a cardboard box filled with mismatched mugs and a half-burnt candle. They were allowed to take what belonged to them, which, as it turned out, wasn't much. I had already secured Grandma's things. Everything else. Furniture I bought. Appliances I replaced. Rugs and shelves and curtains I installed with my own hands. They left the house nearly empty, and I didn't let them back in after that. 2 days later, I walked through the house alone. It smelled stale, like old perfume and stress. But it was quiet, peaceful, mine. I opened the windows, let the light in, and turned on every lamp. Then I called the developer. Let's talk numbers. The offer had risen since the rezoning news spread. What started as a 6-figure bid had grown into a bidding war. By the end of the week, I had a signed agreement, a closing date, and a check that was more than I'd earned in the last 5 years combined. I stood in the driveway on the final day, keys in hand, watching the sun set behind the house I once dreaded walking into. A car slowed as it passed. Not theirs, just a stranger. But I found myself hoping for a second it was them. That they could see what I'd become. That the boy who sat in the corner, forgotten and useful only when convenient, was now the one holding the deed, the pen, the power. Instead, I looked at the keys one last time and dropped them into the realtor's hand. It was done, and yet, I wasn't finished just yet. Because what happened after the sale, well, that was when everything truly came full circle. The fallout wasn't explosive. It was quiet, slow. The kind of unraveling that happens in silence, behind closed doors, where bitterness festers and regret has no one left to lash out at but itself. A week after the house sale closed, I got a text from an unknown number. No name, Just, hope you're proud. We're staying at a motel. Lily's due in 3 weeks. Mom cries every night. I stared at it for a long time. No apology. No ownership. Just a guilt trip wrapped in passive-aggressive pity. The old me might have replied, might have offered help, or at least an explanation. But I just deleted the message and blocked the number. Meanwhile, Grandma was thriving. Her new apartment had become her sanctuary. She joined a book club, made friends with a woman named Edith who taught her how to play bridge, and was walking more now than she had in years. Every Sunday, we had lunch together in the courtyard. We'd talk about small things, her garden, my new position at work, what movies were playing, but the peace in her eyes said more than any words could. I brought her the pearl necklace the pawn shop returned. When I opened the little velvet box, she gasped and covered her mouth. They didn't get away with it, I said softly. None of it. She hugged me then, tighter than I expected. He'd be proud of you, she whispered. Your grandfather. So proud. I believed her. Word of the house sale spread through the extended family. A few cousins reached out, most of them careful and polite now. They wanted to reconnect. One uncle emailed me asking if I had any investment tips, since I seemed to be doing well lately. I ignored them. I didn't need a crowd. Just clarity. And maybe peace. As for Mom and Lily, the consequences came faster than they expected. When Lily finally gave birth, it was in a crowded county hospital. No baby shower gifts. No flowers. Just her and Mom and the cold realization that bridges, once burned, don't rebuild themselves overnight. They tried to move in with a distant cousin, but word had spread about the police report, about the pawn shop, about how I'd been the one supporting them for years without credit. No one wanted to get pulled into that mess. They bounced between cheap motels and borrowed couches, always just one step from the street. Eventually, I heard through Grandma that they'd left town. No forwarding address. No goodbye. Just gone. And I didn't chase them. Instead, I used part of the money from the house to start something I'd dreamed about quietly for years, my own logistics consulting business. Nothing flashy. Just me, my laptop, a small office space, and a growing list of clients who actually respected my time and knowledge. Within 6 months, I was making more than I ever had in retail. Within a year, I hired my first employee. I upgraded my apartment, traveled for the first time in my adult life, took Grandma to the beach, her first vacation since Grandpa passed. Life moved forward. It wasn't revenge for the sake of revenge. It was correction, realignment, reclaiming everything I'd been told I wasn't allowed to have. Respect, peace, freedom. And as I stood outside my office one morning, coffee in hand, watching the sun rise over the city I had once felt so small in, I thought back to that baby shower, to the laughter, the whispers, the way they all said I'd never understand what real family means. And now I do. Real family doesn't come with conditions. Real family doesn't use you, then shame you when you stop giving. Real family is the one you protect, even when they never protected you. That was my final lesson, and I learned it the hard way. But I learned it, and I never looked back. I was 29 when my life went up in flames, and the match was lit by my own brother. My name's Malcolm, and if you'd told me 5 years ago that I'd go completely no contact with my entire family, I would have laughed in your face. I used to be the guy who showed up for every family dinner, every birthday party, every random Sunday barbecue, just because my mom said, "We're all getting together." I was the one who fixed Dad's truck when it broke down, who helped my brother move into his first apartment, who even co-signed his first car because his credit was a mess. Family was everything to me, until the day it wasn't. I was engaged to my college sweetheart, Lila. We'd been together for almost 8 years. High school sweethearts turned partners, the kind of couple that everyone assumes will make it. We had the same goofy sense of humor, the same love of bad 80s music, the same someday we'll buy a house with a porch swing dream. We'd set a date, booked a venue, sent the save the dates. I was saving for the honeymoon while working long hours at a logistics firm, and I thought my future was secure. Turns out, the person I should have been worried about wasn't Lila, but my older brother, Grant. Grant had always been the golden child. If he got a C in school, Mom called the teacher and demanded extra credit. If I got an A-, Dad would say, "Why not an A?" It was subtle favoritism at first, the bigger slice of cake, the better Christmas presents. But as we got older, it became obvious. Grant could do no wrong. When he dropped out of college, my parents said he was finding himself. When I graduated with honors, they said, "Good. Now you can help your brother get back on his feet." Grant was charismatic, funny, and admittedly, he had that charm that made people forgive him too easily. I didn't realize until much later that he'd used that charm like a weapon. The first red flag came a few months before the wedding. Lila seemed distant. Nothing dramatic, just little things. Not laughing as much at our inside jokes. Taking longer to text back, saying she was too tired to come over. I chalked it up to wedding stress. Then one night, my mom called me and said in that sharp, serious tone she reserves for family meetings that I needed to come over. When I got there, Grant was already sitting at the kitchen table, arms crossed, looking smug. Lila wasn't there. Mom said, "Malcolm, we need to talk about what you've been doing." My stomach dropped. "What are you talking about?" I asked. Grant jumped in, saying he'd caught me texting another woman, a coworker apparently. According to him, he'd seen my phone lighting up at a family dinner, taken it, and found flirty messages. I was stunned. Not only had I not been texting anyone inappropriate, but I never even let Grant near my phone. When I tried to defend myself, Mom shut me down. "Don't lie," she said coldly. "Lila knows." She came to us crying. I remember standing there, heart pounding, trying to call Lila to clear this up, but she didn't answer. 2 days later, Lila called off the wedding. She wouldn't meet with me, wouldn't talk, just send a single text. I can't marry someone I can't trust. My world cracked open. I begged her to hear me out, but it was like screaming into a void. The next thing I knew, Grant was suddenly supporting her through this tough time, which looked suspiciously like them spending a lot of time together. Every time I asked my parents if they believed me, they just said, "Lila deserves honesty. You brought this on yourself." 3 weeks later, Grant posted a picture of him and Lila holding hands on Instagram. The caption was some nauseating quote about true love finding a way. I showed it to my mom, furious, and she just said, "She chose the better son. Maybe this is for the best." That sentence is branded into my memory like a hot iron. The better son. Like I was some broken version of Grant that had to be discarded so she could be happy. That night, I packed a duffel bag, moved out of state, and stopped answering every call. I didn't just go low contact. I went ghost. I spent the next 3 years rebuilding from scratch. I threw myself into work, into getting promoted, into making sure that when people thought of Malcolm, they thought of someone competent, respected, and untouchable. But even as I moved up the ranks, even as my apartment turned into a condo and my savings account fattened, I couldn't shake the bitterness. I'd see their holiday photos pop up on Facebook, Grant and Lila at Christmas, Mom smiling like she hadn't helped blow up my life, and something cold would settle in my chest. I didn't want to see them. I didn't want to hear from them. But I promised myself that if I ever got the chance to face Grant again, it wouldn't be as the little brother he lied about. It would be as someone who could look him in the eye without flinching. That chance came faster than I thought. 3 years into my self-imposed exile, my company merged with a smaller firm, and I got promoted again. This time to CEO. It was a whirlwind of handshakes, board meetings, and new faces until I looked at the employee roster and saw a name I hadn't seen in years. Grant. Same last name. Same smug face in the company photo. My hands literally shook as I scrolled through his file, seeing that he was a mid-level manager. My brother. The man who stole my fiancée. The man who ruined my relationship with my family. He worked for me now. I didn't tell anyone right away. I sat with it. Let the shock settle into something calmer, sharper. I pictured what it would feel like to see him again after all this time. To stand in front of him, not as the brother he humiliated, but as his boss. To watch his face when he realized who signed his paychecks. It was almost too poetic. And that's when I knew this story wasn't over. Not yet. When I finally saw Grant again, it wasn't in some dramatic showdown or at a family event. It was a Tuesday morning, and I'd been walking the floor to get a feel for the department heads I was now responsible for leading. I was dressed in a tailored navy suit, the kind of thing I never could have afforded 3 years ago, and feeling quietly powerful, like I had finally stepped into the life I'd been building brick by brick. And then I heard it. That laugh. Grant's laugh was unmistakable, loud, unfiltered, the kind that made everyone turn their heads even if the joke wasn't funny. I stopped mid-step, my pulse spiking as my brain caught up. I followed the sound and turned the corner into a conference room where a group of managers were gathering for their weekly sync. And there he was. Grant looked almost exactly the same, maybe a little heavier around the middle, hair cut short in that slightly too casual way he'd always favored. He was leaning against the table, holding court, cracking some joke about a client that made the rest of the room chuckle. For a moment, I was frozen, watching him like he was an animal I hadn't seen in years. My stomach twisted, not just with anger, but with something heavier, older. Seeing him brought back everything all at once. The kitchen confrontation, Mom's words, Lila's silence, the way my heart had felt like it was physically collapsing in my chest. I must have stood there longer than I realized because eventually someone noticed me and cleared their throat. Grant, one of the other managers said, the new CEO's here. Grant turned, and I swear I saw the color drain from his face. For one perfect, silent moment, we just stared at each other. His grin faltered, his posture straightened, and I could practically see the gears turning in his head as he tried to reconcile what he was seeing. I gave him the smallest, calmest smile I could manage. "Morning," I said, my voice even. "Don't let me interrupt." And then I walked past him, took a seat at the head of the table, and started the meeting like nothing had happened. That first encounter set the tone, but the tension didn't dissipate. It thickened. Over the next few weeks, I watched Grant closely. He tried to act normal, tried to pretend nothing had happened between us, but I could tell he was rattled. Every time I entered a room, he sat up straighter. Every time I spoke, he listened just a little too intently, like he was trying to gauge how much I knew. But it wasn't just about him. Seeing Grant in this environment made me realize just how deep the old family wounds still ran. My parents hadn't reached out in years, and now, suddenly, Mom started texting me again. "I heard you got promoted. Congratulations, sweetheart," one message said. "We should all get dinner soon. Grant says you look great." The hypocrisy made my jaw clench. Where was this energy when I was begging them to believe me? I ignored the first few texts, but they kept coming, each one more insistent than the last. "Lila is pregnant," one read, like it was supposed to make me drop everything and rush back into the fold. "You're going to be an uncle." The kicker came one Friday night. I was still at the office, going through quarterly projections, when my phone lit up with a call from Dad. I let it go to voicemail. Then curiosity got the better of me, and I listened. "Malcolm," Dad said, his tone gruff. "I don't know what your problem is with your brother, but enough is enough. Your family. It's time to forgive and move on. Grant's doing well for himself now, and he and Lila could really use your support. Be the bigger man for once. Be the bigger man." Those 4 words simmered in my brain for days. Be the bigger man, like I hadn't already been swallowing my anger for 3 years just to get through the day. Like I hadn't rebuilt my entire life from the ground up because of their betrayal. It wasn't enough that they had taken Lila from me. Now I was supposed to come crawling back, smiling, and play the role of doting brother and uncle? The next Monday, I noticed something that made everything crystal clear. Grant was terrible at his job. Not just needs improvement, bad. I mean actively negligent. He missed deadlines, pawned off his work on his subordinates, and spent more time in the break room than at his desk. The only thing keeping his department afloat was a senior analyst who clearly resented having to do her boss's job. One afternoon, I sat in on one of his presentations. It was a disaster, poorly organized, full of errors, and delivered with the kind of fake confidence that only works if no one asks follow-up questions. When I pressed him on one of his numbers, he stammered, gave a nonsense answer, and then blamed someone else. I felt the entire room go silent as everyone watched me, waiting to see if I'd call him out. I didn't. Not yet. Instead, I started collecting information. Quietly, carefully. I had HR pull performance reviews. I asked for department metrics. I scheduled one-on-ones with his direct reports and let them vent about how they hadn't had proper leadership in months. Every piece of evidence stacked higher and higher, building a picture not just of incompetence, but of entitlement, the same entitlement I'd grown up with. Grant had coasted his whole life on charm and our parents' protection, and now he was coasting here, too. Meanwhile, the family pressure ramped up. Mom called me out of the blue one night, her voice syrupy sweet. "We're having a little get-together this weekend," she said. "Why don't you come? Grant and Lila will be there, and it would mean the world if we could all be together again. Your father, and I think it's time to let bygones be bygones." I almost laughed. Bygones. Like they hadn't publicly humiliated me, chosen my brother over me, and cut me out of their lives until I became someone worth bragging about again. I'm busy, I said flatly. You're always busy, Mom snapped, the sweetness gone. You can't stay mad forever. Life's too short. I hung up without saying goodbye. That night, I sat in my apartment staring at the city lights, the old anger mixing with something new, a sense of purpose. I realized that what I was feeling wasn't just resentment. It was clarity. I had the power now. I didn't have to beg anyone to see my side of things. I didn't have to prove my worth to my parents or to Grant or to anyone else. But that didn't mean I was going to let it go. The next morning, I requested a full audit of Grant's department. And as the results started rolling in, the story they told was exactly what I expected, and worse. Missing documentation, mismanaged budgets, clients unhappy with communication, even rumors of him taking credit for other people's work. I kept my face neutral when I passed him in the hallway, but inside, something cold and steady was forming. I wasn't going to blow up, wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of seeing me lose control. If Grant thought he could just coast through this job the way he coasted through life, he was about to find out exactly how wrong he was. And as fate would have it, the perfect opportunity to confront him and everything he'd done to me was about to present itself in a way that even I couldn't have scripted better. The day everything snapped started out so ordinary, it was almost insulting. A Thursday morning, a stack of emails, 2 back-to-back strategy calls, nothing out of the ordinary. I was halfway through reviewing a vendor contract when my assistant poked her head in. "Malcolm," she said carefully, "you might want to see this." She handed me a printed email chain. My name was highlighted, not just once, but several times, and the subject line made my stomach tighten. Leadership concerns, CEO's direction. I read the email slowly, line by line, the words digging deeper with every sentence. It was an internal message thread between a few department managers, but the first message was from Grant. "Look, I don't think Malcolm is the right fit for this role. He's young, inexperienced, and making decisions that could tank this company if we're not careful. I've heard from multiple people that morale is dropping since he took over. I'm considering taking this to the board if he doesn't start listening to reason." He'd CC'd several other managers, people I had just started building trust with. The replies ranged from hesitant agreement to open complaints, and every single one of them was now on paper, sitting in my hand. My first reaction wasn't even anger. It was disbelief. After everything, after stealing my fiancée, after ruining my relationship with my family, Grant was trying to undermine me at my own company. I could almost feel the walls closing in, the faint hum of panic at the back of my skull. If I hadn't been careful, if I hadn't taken the time to build relationships here, this kind of rumor could have been enough to shake confidence in me as a leader. I set the papers down, took a slow breath, and reminded myself that I had leverage now. Unlike 3 years ago, I wasn't the powerless younger brother being accused of something I didn't do. I could choose how to respond. But then things escalated. Later that afternoon, I overheard 2 junior analysts talking in the hallway. "Did you hear?" one of them whispered. "Grant said the CEO only got the job because of nepotism. Apparently, he tanked his last department, but the board owed him a favor." I froze. Nepotism. The word stung more than I expected. It was a direct attack not just on my competence, but on my reputation. And worse, it was exactly the kind of thing that could stick if left unchecked. I felt a hot rush of anger that made my chest tight. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my apartment replaying the day over and over, each memory sharper than the last. Grant's smug expression during that first meeting. Mom's voice telling me to be the bigger man. Dad's voicemail, practically ordering me to forgive. Now this, a direct attempt to sabotage me professionally. I thought about picking up the phone and calling him right then, demanding an explanation. But then I remembered how it had gone last time I tried to defend myself. The kitchen table, the accusations, the way everyone had already decided I was guilty before I even opened my mouth. No, I wasn't going to give him the chance to talk his way out of this. The next morning, I called HR and requested a formal review of all internal communications involving Grant. They hesitated at first. It was a bold move, but I had enough cause to push it through. When the report came back a few days later, it was worse than I'd imagined. Not only had Grant been spreading rumors about me, but he'd been actively encouraging other employees to question my decisions, even suggesting they bypass my directives and run approvals through him instead. In one particularly infuriating message, he wrote, Trust me, Malcolm won't last long. Just keep your heads down, do what I tell you, and we'll have a real leader in place soon. It was a coup. My own brother was trying to orchestrate a mutiny. As if that weren't enough, the same week I got the HR report, my phone buzzed with a message from Mom. We heard you're being difficult with Grant at work. He told us you're threatening his job. You've already taken so much from him, Malcolm. Don't do this to your brother. I just sat there staring at the screen, my hand shaking. Taken so much from him? He was the one who lied. He was the one who took Lila. And now somehow I was the villain again. That message broke something in me. It wasn't just about Grant anymore. It was about the entire pattern. The years of being second best, the years of being told to just let it go, while my brother skated by without consequences. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel the urge to defend myself. I didn't feel the urge to explain or beg them to see reason. Instead, I felt this calm, razor-sharp clarity settle over me. Grant had made this personal. He wanted a war. And this time, I wasn't the one unarmed. The next step was to gather allies. I started meeting with the managers he'd CC'd on that email, one by one, not accusing him directly, but asking pointed questions about their concerns. More than a few of them admitted that Grant had pressured them into agreeing with him, or that they'd only gone along because they didn't want to deal with the fallout. One of them even confided that Grant had been hinting about taking my job himself, saying the board would be more comfortable with someone who had been with the company longer. That was the moment I decided that this wasn't just going to be a warning or a write-up. This was going to end with Grant out of the company entirely. But before I could move, the final blow came, and it was one I never saw coming. One morning, I walked into the office to find a package on my desk. No return address. Inside was a framed photo. It was from my wedding that never happened. Lila and I standing in front of the venue we'd booked, holding hands, smiling like two people who thought the future was bright. Across the bottom of the photo, written in black marker, were the words, "Guess it worked out for the best. G and L." My breath caught in my throat. My vision actually went blurry for a second. He hadn't just sabotaged my job. He'd taken the time to twist the knife in the oldest wound I had. I set the photo down carefully, my hands shaking. And then I laughed. Quietly at first, then louder, until it startled my assistant outside the door. Because in that moment, all the fear, all the doubt, all the hesitation burned away. Grant had just given me permission to do what I'd been planning all along. And this time, there would be no coming back from it for him. When I got home that night, I didn't turn on the lights. I just sat on my couch in the dark, the photo still in my bag like some poisonous artifact. I couldn't look at it, but I couldn't throw it away either. It sat there, heavy, reminding me of everything I had lost, the life I was supposed to have, the family I used to think would always be there for me. For hours, I just existed. The city moved outside my window. Horns, footsteps, distant laughter, but I felt like I was underwater. My chest ached in that way it used to right after Lila left, like my ribs were too tight around my lungs. All those years of progress, of clawing my way back to some version of happiness, and in one day, Grant had managed to make me feel like that heartbroken guy again, standing in my parents' kitchen with everyone looking at me like I was a stranger. I didn't eat dinner. I didn't answer my phone when it buzzed with another message from Mom. "Malcolm, you have to stop this feud before it destroys the family. Grant and Lila are happy. Can't you be happy for them? Happy for them." I closed my eyes and leaned back on the couch, letting the words dig their claws in. It wasn't just that they'd chosen Grant. It was that they expected me to celebrate it, to be grateful that my ex-fiancé and my brother had found love at my expense. I didn't sleep much that night. At some point, I found myself at my kitchen table with a legal pad, just scribbling names, dates, projects Grant had botched, employees he'd upset. It wasn't a plan, not yet. It was just everything I'd been holding in, dumped onto paper. When I stopped writing, the page was a mess of ink and my hand hurt, but something in me felt lighter. The next morning, I woke up with that same dull ache in my chest, but there was also something new, resolve. If I was going to do this, if I was going to hold him accountable, it couldn't be out of anger alone. I had to be methodical, careful. The last time I tried to fight for myself, I lost everything. This time, I couldn't afford to misstep. I started showing up to work earlier than usual, staying later. I kept my interactions with Grant polite but brief, forcing myself to smile when he made some half-hearted joke in the break room. It was exhausting, playing the part of the calm, reasonable CO, while my insides were a storm. Every night, I went home and did my research. I learned everything I could about corporate policy, about performance reviews, about the exact thresholds we needed to meet before termination could be justified. I knew if I handled this wrong, he'd cry favoritism, maybe even try to sue for wrongful dismissal. I wasn't just going to remove him. I was going to make sure there wasn't a single loose thread for him to pull on afterward. But even as I plotted, there were moments where the grief still hit me hard. I'd find myself staring at old photos, me and Lila at the state fair, me and Grant as kids in matching baseball uniforms. There were nights where I almost picked up the phone, almost texted her, almost asked her if it was worth it. But every time I got close, I remembered that photo, that smug black marker scrawl. At work, the pressure grew. The audit reports kept piling up, painting an uglier and uglier picture of Grant's department. Missed deadlines that cost us thousands, client contracts mishandled, even an expense report that hinted at him charging personal meals to the company card. I sat in my office staring at the numbers, wondering how he'd gotten this far without someone stepping in. And then it hit me. He'd gotten this far because no one ever stepped in. Our whole lives, Grant had been rescued by mom, by dad, by teachers, by bosses. People liked him, forgave him, gave him second and third chances. Maybe I had been doing the same thing, even now, by hesitating. That night, I stayed at the office long after everyone had left. The building was quiet except for the hum of the HVAC. I sat at my desk, pulled out the photo again, and set it upright in front of me. I stared at it until my chest stopped hurting. "This ends with you out of my life," I said quietly, my voice steady for the first time in days. It wasn't rage anymore. It wasn't heartbreak. It was a promise. The next morning, I met with HR again. This time, I didn't just ask for reports. I asked for timelines, for documentation, for everything we would need if things escalated. I asked legal to flag any compliance risks tied to his projects. I started drafting a performance improvement plan so tight, he wouldn't be able to slip through a single loophole. At home, I made changes too. I blocked mom's number, then dad's. I logged out of social media entirely, deleted the apps from my phone. If they wanted to keep siding with Grant, they could do it without dragging me back into their drama. Walking away from them hurt more than I expected. There were moments, in the elevator, in the middle of brushing my teeth, where I felt like a little kid again, like I'd done something wrong and just wanted mom to tell me it was okay. But I held firm. The part of me that used to chase their approval was gone. A few weeks later, I attended a quarterly board meeting. It was a big one, financials, projections, major strategy decisions. I knew Grant would be there to present his department's numbers, and part of me braced for the possibility that he'd try to throw me under the bus again. But when he stood up to give his presentation, something unexpected happened. He stumbled. Not just a little, badly. His slides were a mess, his numbers didn't add up, and halfway through, one of the board members interrupted to ask a clarifying question that Grant couldn't answer. I watched him flounder, sweat gathering at his temples, his confidence cracking in real time. I should have felt triumphant. Instead, I just felt quiet. Because in that moment, I saw him clearly. Not the older brother who'd always been one step ahead of me. Not the man who stole my fiancée. Not the villain I'd built up in my head. Just Grant. Flawed. Overconfident. And for the first time, I realized he was afraid. And that was when I knew my plan was going to work. Rock bottom wasn't the night I sat in the dark with that photo. It was the moment I realized how far he'd fallen without even knowing it, and how far I was about to make him fall next. The turning point came the week after that disastrous board meeting. Something shifted, not just in how I saw Grant, but in how the board and the other executives saw me. I noticed it in little things at first. The way the CFO lingered after the meeting to ask for my opinion on a restructuring plan. The way a few department heads suddenly seemed much more eager to align with my directives. It was as if watching Grant flounder had reminded them that I wasn't just the new CEO. I was the one holding the company together. I leaned into it. I started setting a clearer vision for the company, not just numbers on a slide deck, but something people could rally behind. I scheduled lunches with key clients, restructured a few underperforming teams, and made a point of being visible. Every morning, I walked the floors, greeting people by name, asking how projects were going. It wasn't just PR, it was deliberate. I wanted every single person in this company to know that I wasn't some untouchable figure in a corner office. I was invested in them. Slowly, I could feel the tide turning. Morale improved. Deadlines were met more consistently. Even the atmosphere in the building felt different, less tense, more focused. And with every small win, my confidence grew. Meanwhile, I kept collecting everything I could on Grant. Each missed deadline, each budget overage, each complaint from his direct reports. I filed it all away, building a case so solid no one could accuse me of acting out of spite. The senior analyst who had been carrying his department finally came to me one afternoon, exhausted. "Malcolm, I can't keep doing his job and mine," she said. "I've tried talking to him, but he just shrugs it off." I thanked her, asked her to document everything, and assured her I was handling it. The relief on her face was almost painful, like she'd been waiting for someone to notice. The funny thing was, the more I focused on fixing the company, the less Grant seemed to notice that the ground was shifting under him. He kept coasting, kept showing up late to meetings, kept making sloppy mistakes. It was almost surreal, like he thought nothing could touch him, even though I was now the one in charge. Outside of work, my life was leveling up too. The long hours I'd been putting in started paying off financially. I moved out of my modest condo and into a sleek apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the city. I bought a car I'd always wanted but never thought I could afford. I even started seeing someone. Nothing serious yet, just dinners and conversation, but it felt good to feel like myself again, like I wasn't defined by what had happened 3 years ago. I'd catch myself smiling sometimes on the drive home, thinking about how far I'd come. I wasn't the broken guy on the kitchen floor anymore. I wasn't the brother everyone dismissed. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, and for the first time in a long time, I liked where it was going. But I never lost sight of the bigger picture. One afternoon, I scheduled a meeting with HR and legal to review everything we had on Grant so far. We went through the documentation line by line, and by the end of the meeting, there was no question. If I wanted to terminate him, I had more than enough grounds. Still, I didn't move right away. Timing mattered. If I was going to do this, it had to be at the right moment, in the right way, so there would be no doubt in anyone's mind that this wasn't personal. This was professional. And then, as if the universe wanted to give me a push, I got an email from the board chair. "Malcolm, we've been impressed with your leadership these past few months. We'd like you to present your long-term strategy at the next shareholder meeting." The shareholder meeting was the single biggest event of the year. Investors, analysts, major clients, everyone who mattered would be there. If there was ever a moment to make a statement, this was it. I spent the next few weeks preparing like my life depended on it. Late nights, early mornings, running numbers until they were flawless, rehearsing my presentation until I could do it in my sleep. I wasn't just presenting a strategy. I was presenting myself, the leader I had become, the one no one could accuse of being there because of luck or favoritism. The night before the meeting, I stayed in the office long after everyone else had gone home. The building was quiet, the city glowing outside the windows. I sat there with the lights dimmed, staring at the skyline, thinking about everything that had led me here. 3 years ago, I had been humiliated, abandoned, and broken. Now I was at the helm of a company, respected, feared even, and about to stand in front of an audience that included my brother, the same brother who had told people I wouldn't last. I pictured his face when I walked onto that stage. I pictured the moment he would realize that there was no saving him this time. No mom or dad to bail him out. No Lila to smooth things over. For the first time, the idea didn't just feel satisfying. It felt inevitable. The next morning, I put on my best suit, charcoal gray, perfectly tailored, and stood in front of the mirror for a long time. I didn't see the Malcolm who had been left behind, who had packed a bag and run away 3 years ago. I saw someone who had built himself back from nothing. Someone who was ready. The shareholder meeting was held in the largest conference hall in the building. The place buzzed with energy, investors chatting, executives checking notes, assistants running around with clipboards. I walked to the front of the room and took my place behind the podium, my heart steady, my mind clear. Grant sat 2 rows back. I didn't look at him right away. I didn't need to. I could feel his presence, feel the weight of his stare. When I finally did meet his eyes, I didn't smile. I didn't nod. I just held his gaze for one long, electric second before turning back to the room. "Good morning," I said into the microphone, my voice carrying over the room. "Let's talk about the future." And in that moment, I knew. The future I was about to build did not have a place for Grant. The rise was almost complete. All that was left now was to deliver the final blow, carefully, publicly, and in a way that no one could ever question. The shareholder meeting was the first time I truly felt the weight of my position, not just as a leader, but as the person steering the entire future of the company. I stood there with the presentation clicker in my hand, laser-focused, my voice steady as I laid out our growth projections, our restructuring plans, and the initiatives I'd been quietly putting into motion since taking over. The room stayed silent except for the occasional scribble of pens and the soft murmur of agreement from the board chair. When I finished, the applause was louder than I expected. It wasn't just polite, it was enthusiastic. Investors came up afterward to shake my hand, complimenting the clarity of my vision. I caught Grant in my peripheral vision, standing stiffly near the back, jaw tight. He didn't approach me, didn't congratulate me. For once, he didn't have a snide comment ready. That reaction, or rather, that lack of one, told me everything. He wasn't just threatened. He knew the ground was slipping under his feet. Over the next few weeks, the power shift became undeniable. The board started looping me in earlier on decisions, asking my opinion before anyone else's. I was invited to a private strategy retreat with the top 5 executives, an event Grant was notably not invited to. It wasn't even me pulling strings. It was simply the natural result of his dwindling reputation and my rising one. But the most important piece of the puzzle fell into my lap one Tuesday afternoon, completely by accident. I was reviewing expense reports, part of the new oversight I'd implemented, when something jumped out. A series of transactions filed under Grant's department that had no clear business purpose. Catered dinners at upscale restaurants, electronics purchases that didn't match any approved projects, even a hotel stay in another city that wasn't connected to any client trip. At first, I thought it might just be sloppy record keeping. But when I had finance pull the receipts, the pattern became obvious. Grant was using the company credit card for personal expenses, thousands of dollars worth over the past year. Some of the charges even overlapped with his honeymoon dates. I sat back in my chair, heart pounding, letting the weight of what I'd just uncovered settle in. This wasn't just incompetence anymore. This was grounds for termination with cause, and potentially even legal action if the company wanted to push it. I forwarded the file to legal with a short note. Please review for compliance implications. The response came back within an hour. This is a serious breach of company policy. If substantiated, it justifies immediate termination and repayment of funds. Recommend proceeding carefully to ensure airtight documentation. This was the leverage I hadn't even realized I'd been waiting for. But I didn't move right away. Not yet. Instead, I tightened the net. I had HR do a full audit of his department's card usage, cross-referencing every expense with client projects. I asked compliance to sit in on his next budget review, unannounced. I even quietly reassigned a few of his more competent team members to other managers, leaving him with a skeleton crew. And then, because timing was everything, I scheduled a mid-year performance review for him, in person, with HR present. When the day came, Grant walked into my office looking irritated, like he had better things to do. He sat down across from me, slouched back in the chair, and gave me a smirk that felt almost nostalgic, the same smirk he used to give me when we were kids and he'd just gotten away with something. I slid the first page of the report across the desk. Grant, I said evenly, we need to talk about your department's performance. He glanced at the page, then shrugged. Look, I know we've had a few delays, but this isn't about delays, I interrupted. My tone was calm, controlled. This is about misuse of company funds. For a split second, I saw the mask crack. His eyes flicked down to the report, then back up to me, calculating. You're really going to do this? He said, voice low. Over a few dinners? This isn't about dinners, I said, sliding the rest of the documentation across the table. Every charge, every receipt, every date. This is about a pattern of behavior that puts the company at risk. He leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. You've been waiting for this, haven't you? Waiting to stick it to me. This is about Lila. Admit it. I didn't flinch. This is about your job performance, I said, and whether you're capable of meeting the standards we expect from a department head. HR sat silently to my right, taking notes. Grant's smirk faltered, replaced by something closer to panic. You can't fire me. The board won't let you. They know what you're doing. The board has already seen this report, I said quietly. They authorized me to take whatever action I deemed necessary. For the first time in years, Grant had no comeback. He just sat there, jaw tight, staring at me like he didn't recognize me. When the meeting ended, I didn't fire him. Not yet. I handed him a performance improvement plan instead, one that outlined every expectation in excruciating detail and set deadlines so aggressive that even the most dedicated employee would struggle to meet them. "This is your chance to turn it around," I said. He grabbed the folder and stormed out without another word. After he left, HR turned to me and said quietly, "That was restrained." I just nodded. "We're not done yet." Because the truth was, this wasn't about giving him a chance. This was about watching him sweat. Watching him realize that the safety net he'd relied on his entire life was gone. And as fate would have it, the perfect opportunity for the final act was just around the corner. The annual company-wide town hall. A live-streamed event with every employee watching, the single most public forum we had. I made sure Grant's department would be presenting their quarterly results. And I made sure I'd be the one holding the microphone when it was time to talk about accountability. By the time the town hall rolled around, everything was in place. The documentation, the board's approval, the compliance findings, an airtight case that no one could argue with. All that was left was to decide just how public I wanted this to be. And as I stood backstage that morning, watching employees file into the auditorium, I knew the answer. This wasn't just about firing him. This was about finally taking back everything he'd taken from me, my dignity, my peace, my place in the family. And I was going to do it in a way that he would never, ever forget. The morning of the town hall, I woke up before my alarm. I didn't feel nervous. I didn't feel angry. I felt sharp, like a blade that had been slowly honed over 3 years of quiet grinding. The plan was ready, every piece in place. Today wasn't going to be loud or messy. It was going to be surgical. I arrived early, before most of the staff, and stood at the back of the auditorium while the AV crew tested microphones and adjusted lights. The stage was set up with a long table for department heads to present their quarterly updates. I could see Grant's name card already in place. The sight of it made something settle inside me, a strange mix of satisfaction and finality. This was it. By the time the room filled, there was a hum of energy in the air. The town hall was always a big deal. Employees from every branch tuned in live, and the recording would go out to investors later that day. If there was ever a moment to make a statement, this was it. I started with the usual formalities: company updates, financial health, recognition for teams that had gone above and beyond. The audience was engaged, leaning in, nodding. The atmosphere was almost celebratory. And then it was time for department updates. Grant walked onto the stage last, looking tense but defiant. He had tried, I could tell. His suit was pressed, his slides looked more polished than usual, and he kept glancing at me like he was daring me to say something. When it was his turn to speak, I stepped back and let him take the mic. His presentation was better than usual, still sloppy in places, but he clearly put more effort into it than he had in months. He was trying to save himself, and everyone in the room could feel it. When he finished, I stepped forward again. "Thank you, Grant," I said evenly, taking the microphone back. "I'd like to talk a little bit about accountability." The room quieted. "One of the things we've been focusing on this quarter," I continued, "is ensuring that every department is operating at the highest level of integrity. We owe that to our clients, to our shareholders, and to each other." Behind me, the screen changed, not to the next department slides, but to a summary of the audit findings from Grant's department. Missing deliverables, budget overruns, compliance violations. Every bullet point backed by dates and figures. I didn't look at him. I kept my gaze on the audience. "These findings are not hypothetical," I said calmly. "They represent real lapses that have cost this company time, money, and credibility. And they require decisive action." There was a ripple of murmurs through the room. I let the silence stretch for a moment before continuing. "Effective immediately," I said, my voice steady. "Grant will no longer be serving as department head. A search for new leadership will begin today, and interim management will report directly to me." The room went so quiet you could have heard a pin drop. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Grant stiffen. He looked like someone had just yanked the ground out from under him. I turned to face him at last. "Grant, please remain after the town hall to meet with HR and finalize the transition plan." He opened his mouth like he was about to argue, then shut it again when he saw the entire company watching. His face was pale, his jaw tight, but he nodded stiffly. I turned back to the audience. This is not about punishment, I said, my tone even. This is about accountability and ensuring that we are all working toward the same standard of excellence. We have a responsibility to each other, and that means holding ourselves and each other accountable when we fall short. When the town hall ended, there was no applause, just a heavy, charged silence as people filed out, whispering. The message had landed, not just about Grant, but about me. Afterward, HR and legal joined me in my office. Grant came in last, still holding the folder from his performance plan. "You can't humiliate me like that," he said, his voice low and tight. "You humiliated yourself," I replied evenly. "I just made sure the company understood why you won't be here anymore." "You think this makes you the bigger man?" he snapped. "No," I said, standing and meeting his eyes. Being the bigger man was what I did 3 years ago when I walked away and started over instead of burning everything down. I gestured to the stack of reports on my desk. "This is just closure." HR took over then, going through the formal termination process. Grant sat there, stone-faced, signing where he had to sign, refusing to look at me. When it was done, he stood, adjusted his jacket, and said quietly, "Mom and Dad will hear about this." "They probably already have," I said. "But here's the thing, I don't care anymore." For a moment, he just stood there, staring at me like he didn't recognize me. Then he turned and walked out, the door closing softly behind him. I sat back down at my desk, exhaling slowly. It was done, but as satisfying as it wasn't noisy or dramatic. There was no shouting match, no grand scene, just a clean, final severing of the last tie between us. And as word spread through the company over the next few days, something else happened. Employees started stopping by my office to say thank you. Not because they hated Grant, but because they felt heard, protected. It was a subtle but powerful shift. The revenge wasn't just about firing him. It was about reclaiming my voice, my power, my ability to decide what stayed in my life and what didn't. And yet, a part of me knew the fallout was still coming. From my family, from the whispers that were no doubt spreading through their group chats right now. And I was ready for it. Because this time, I had nothing to lose. The fallout started faster than I expected, less than 24 hours after the town hall. My phone lit up with a string of missed calls from my parents, back to back like an alarm I couldn't shut off. I didn't answer. When the voicemails came in, I listened to them once, just to be sure I was done with any shred of guilt. Mom's voice was first, sharp and accusing. "Malcolm, what on earth were you thinking? Firing your brother in front of the whole company? Do you have any idea what that's done to him? He's humiliated. You should be ashamed." Then Dad's voice, rough and clipped. "You're tearing this family apart. You could have handled this privately. Grant told us you've been targeting him for months. You've made your point, son. Now fix this. Fix this." I almost laughed. For years, those 2 words had been the burden I carried, the one expected to patch things up, smooth things over, make life easier for everyone but myself. I didn't call them back. Instead, I focused on work. The company needed stability, and that's what I gave them. We named an interim head for Grant's department, redistributed responsibilities, and in 2 weeks, performance was already improving. The board congratulated me for taking decisive action, and the shareholders sent a formal note of appreciation for the transparency. The whispers died down. People moved on. But Grant didn't. One evening, about a month after his termination, I was leaving the office late when I saw him standing by the building's front entrance. He looked different. Not polished, not smug. Just tired. His suit was wrinkled, his hair slightly disheveled. "Malcolm," he said as I approached, his voice low. I stopped a few feet away. "Grant, you ruined me," he said flatly. "No one in this industry will touch me after what you did." "You ruined yourself," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I just stopped covering for you." He stepped closer, his expression raw in a way I'd never seen before. "You got everything, you know that? The job, the respect, the title, and you still couldn't let me have anything. Not even Lila." At the mention of her name, something twisted in my chest, but I didn't let it show. "You didn't have Lila," I said. "You lied to get her. You burned me to the ground so you could stand where I was standing. And you know what? You still lost." He flinched like I'd struck him. For a second, I thought he might hit me, but then his shoulders slumped. "I don't know what I'm supposed to do now," he admitted quietly, almost to himself. "That's not my problem anymore. I said. For the first time in our lives, you get to deal with your own mess. Maybe that's the best thing that could have happened to you. He stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away, his figure disappearing into the dark street. That was the last time we spoke. A few weeks later, I got a final text from Mom. "We're disappointed in you, Malcolm. You've changed." I stared at the message for a long time before typing a reply. Good. I was supposed to, and then I blocked her number. Life moved on. The company flourished under the new structure, and morale reached an all-time high. My name began circulating in industry circles as a case study for decisive leadership. One Friday evening, I stood in my apartment looking out over the city skyline, a glass of whiskey in my hand. The sun was setting, painting everything gold, and for the first time in years, I felt completely still inside. Grant was gone from the company. The weight of my family's expectations was gone too. I had rebuilt my life on my own terms. No apologies, no compromises. I walked over to the drawer where I'd kept that framed photo, the one with the black marker message that had pushed me over the edge. I took it out, looked at it one last time, and then opened the window. The glass frame slipped from my fingers, fell 12 stories, and shattered on the pavement below. And just like that, the last piece of the past was gone. I closed the window, finished my drink, and smiled. For the first time since the day everything fell apart, I felt free. Not just free from Grant, or from my parents' favoritism, or from the ghost of Lila, but free from the version of myself who kept trying to earn their approval. And as the city lights flickered on one by one, I knew with absolute certainty, I hadn't just survived what they did to me. I had turned it into the best thing that ever happened to me. And this time, there was no one left who could take it away. My name's Alex, I'm 31, and for most of my life, I've played the role of the responsible older brother. You know the type. The one who always shows up on time, pays his bills, keeps his promises, and picks up the slack when the family drops the ball. My younger brother, Tyler, is the complete opposite. He's 26, impulsive, dramatic, and somehow manages to always fall upward. When we were kids, he'd get away with anything, smashing Mom's favorite vase and blaming me, skipping class and forging notes in my name, even borrowing my car in high school and burning through a tank of gas without asking. Every single time, Mom would sigh and say, "He's still growing. He doesn't mean any harm." Then she'd turn to me and lecture me about how I needed to be a better example. I used to think it would all even out when we got older, that once we were adults, Tyler would grow up and we'd become closer. I pictured us laughing at our childhood mistakes, both of us mature enough to leave old grudges behind. I thought maybe one day he'd actually apologize for something, anything, and we'd finally meet halfway. But I guess some people don't grow up. They just get taller. Now, I live a pretty structured life. I work in consulting, the kind of job where punctuality and reputation matter more than charm. It's not glamorous, but it's steady. I've worked hard, saved wisely, and done my best to build a life that's calm and reliable. A few months ago, I proposed to my girlfriend Julia. She said yes. She's everything Tyler isn't: grounded, kind, thoughtful. Her dad, Mark, is a high-level executive at a firm that's kind of a big deal in our city. I didn't know that the first time we met. He was just Julia's dad, a soft-spoken man with a dry sense of humor and a surprisingly accurate knowledge of vintage cars. Over time, he and I got close. He appreciated my work ethic, and we'd have long conversations about leadership, career paths, even family dynamics. He never pushed, but he asked the kind of questions that let me open up without feeling judged. I didn't know how much of our talk stuck with him until much later. As the wedding approached, Julia and I scheduled our engagement photo shoot. I'd gone out of my way to get a tailored suit for the occasion, a deep navy custom piece from a local designer I'd admired for years. It wasn't just a suit. It was a symbol, in a weird way, of the man I was becoming, of how far I'd come. It cost $5,000, which even I admit is ridiculous for clothes, but it was a once-in-a-lifetime kind of moment, and Julia encouraged it. "You deserve to feel amazing in it," she told me. So I splurged. It arrived the week before the shoot, still crisp in the garment bag, untouched. That Saturday, we had a small family brunch planned at my parents' house before the photo shoot. Julia and I were going to head straight from there to the shoot location, a quiet old estate with lots of natural light and old brick archways. She had her dress in the car, and I had my suit in the back seat, carefully hung and protected. I wasn't planning on taking it out until we got to the shoot, but of course, my mother insisted. Come on, let us see it. You'll just change here, what's the difference? I should have said no. I should have known better. But I caved. I went out to the car, brought it in, and carefully unpacked it. The moment I pulled it out, everyone turned to look. Even my dad, not usually one to notice fashion, raised an eyebrow and gave a nod of approval. That's sharp, he said. Julia smiled, proud. My mom commented on the fabric, but then came Tyler. He whistled and said, Dude, this thing looks expensive. How much did this set you back? I shrugged. Enough. Tyler smirked and said, You always were the tryhard. That was his nickname for me growing up. Tryhard. I didn't take the bait. I just smiled and moved to hang the suit up near the window, away from food and chaos. I didn't want anything touching it before the shoot. Tyler, of course, had to be the center of attention. He launched into some story about a motorcycle he wanted to buy, some limited edition model with way more horsepower than he could handle. I found one listed for a steal, he said, eyes flicking toward me. Only problem is I'm short on cash. I need about $6,000 more. Julia raised an eyebrow. I kept sipping my coffee. I figured, he went on, since you've been dropping cash on fancy suits and all, maybe you'd help a brother out. He said it like a joke, like it was funny, but his eyes didn't blink. I responded calmly. No, Tyler, I'm not loaning you $6,000 for a bike. Oh, come on, he said louder. It's not like you're strapped. You make good money. You spend more on dry cleaning than I do on rent. I didn't say anything. That silence was my answer. He scoffed, took a sip of his wine, red wine, mind you, and looked straight at me. Whatever, man. Don't ruin the mood. We're celebrating, right? That's when it happened. Like a switch flipped in him. He leaned back in his chair, stretched a bit too dramatically, and accidentally knocked over his glass. The red wine arced like it was in slow motion. I didn't even have time to react. It splashed across the right sleeve and lapel of the suit, soaking the fabric, blooming like a wound. There was this dead silence in the room. Tyler's face twisted into this fake surprise. Oh no, he said, dragging the words. I'm so clumsy. Then he burst out laughing. Relax, bro. It's just a suit. My jaw clenched. I stared at the fabric, the stains seeping into the threads. Julia stood up immediately, trying to dab it with a napkin. My mother? She just waved a hand. Don't make a scene, Alex. It's an accident. Was it? I said quietly. Tyler shrugged, still laughing. What? You think I did it on purpose? Chill out. You can afford another one. I didn't yell. I didn't even respond. I just turned, picked up the suit, and walked out the front door. Julia followed. She didn't say anything either. She didn't have to. We canceled the shoot that day. There was no saving the fabric. I called the designer, but a replacement wasn't possible in time, and it wasn't refundable either. Later that night, I sat in our apartment, staring at the suit crumpled in the dry cleaner's plastic. My phone buzzed, a text from Tyler. No hard feelings, right? You looked ridiculous in that suit anyway, faced with tears of joy. I stared at it for a long time. Then I opened my messages, scrolled down to Mark, Julia's dad, and typed out a message I never thought I'd send. Hey, quick heads up. You know that new junior consultant you mentioned you were hiring Monday? Tyler, last name. That's my younger brother. His response came 3 minutes later. Got it. Thanks for letting me know. The next morning, at exactly 9:12 a.m., Tyler's world shifted. I didn't hear it firsthand. I didn't have to. But the notification he received lit the fuse for everything that came next. And what happened after that? Well, let's just say the real revenge was only getting started. If Tyler was upset that his job offer got revoked, he didn't show it immediately. In fact, he didn't even mention it at first. It was Mom who brought it up a few days later, as casually as if she were commenting on the weather. We were having Sunday lunch again. Same house, same dining table, same passive-aggressive undertones. Julia didn't come with me this time. She claimed she had errands, but I knew she just didn't want to sit through another afternoon of backhanded jabs and unspoken favoritism. I didn't blame her. If I hadn't been raised in that house, I wouldn't have believed how subtle yet constant the dynamic was. Tyler didn't have to do much to stay the golden child. Just exist, basically. Mom was slicing into her roast chicken when she glanced up and said, Did you hear about Tyler's job offer getting pulled? Apparently, the company just ghosted him. No reason. Isn't that awful? I didn't look up from my plate. Huh, I said, as neutrally as I could. Tyler gave a bitter laugh. Yeah, weirdest thing. One minute I'm in. The next minute I'm getting a canned email saying, we're going in a different direction. No call, no explanation, nothing. I even quit my old job already. Mom made a sympathetic noise. Some companies have no loyalty. It's disgusting. He would have been such an asset to them. My dad, mostly quiet during these things, muttered, well, maybe they Googled you. Tyler threw a piece of bread at him. Har har. Keep it coming, old man. I didn't say anything. I kept eating. And that, apparently, was enough to make me the villain. Mom narrowed her eyes at me. You haven't said a word to support your brother. You're usually the first to offer advice. I shrugged. Sounds like he has it under control. Tyler leaned forward. You think I messed it up, don't you? You think I did something wrong? I looked up then. Did you? He scoffed and sat back in his chair, arms crossed. You know, ever since you got engaged, you've been walking around like you're better than everyone. That one actually made me laugh. You think I'm the one acting superior? Yeah, he said, pointing his fork at me like it was a sword. You never used to be this smug. You used to help me out. Remember when I crashed your car and you covered for me? Or when I needed help with that community college app and you stayed up all night? I remember, I said. And you still dropped out halfway through the semester. He bristled, but Mom jumped in. That's not fair. He was going through a tough time. You were always more academic, Alex. That was always the excuse, wasn't it? Tyler didn't fail. The world failed him. And me? I was the default fixer. The one who had to explain, clean up, compensate. And now that I'd stopped playing that role, suddenly I was the one changing. Later that day, Tyler pulled me aside in the driveway as I was leaving. Hey, he said, his voice lower. Seriously, did you say something to those people? The job? Did you tank it? I looked at him, really looked at him. And for a second, I saw it. Not the arrogant smirk, but something underneath. A flicker of suspicion, of realization. Why would I do that? I asked calmly. He stared at me for a moment longer before shaking his head and chuckling. Right? Just checking. But I could tell. Something in him shifted. The seed had been planted. A few days later, Mom texted me about helping Tyler out with some bills. He's struggling now that he's between jobs. Just a few hundred to help with rent. You know how it is. I stared at the message, thumb hovering over the screen. There was no please. No acknowledgement of what had happened with the suit, or the job, or the constant disrespect. Just another request for me to play the part. I didn't respond. The next morning, she sent another message. You've changed, Alex. Family supports each other. I don't know what's gotten into you lately. I didn't answer that one either. That weekend, I got an invitation to a family dinner. Mom's words, not mine. The kind she only hosts when she wants to smooth things over. I almost declined, but Julia said something that stuck with me. You don't have to go for them, she said. But if you go, make sure you see it for what it is. Not what you wish it was. So I went. Same house, same kitchen. Smelled like lemon cleaner and overcooked potatoes. Same jokes from my dad. Same fake smiles from Tyler. But this time, there was a sharpness underneath it all. Tyler was quieter than usual. Not sulking, but watching. Studying me. Mom poured me a glass of wine. White this time, and said sweetly, So, Alex, tell us more about your wedding plans. We want to help however we can. I paused. You do? Of course, she said. We're family. And you've always been so generous. You're practically floating us already, with everything you do. I didn't answer. I just looked at her. Tyler leaned forward. Still planning to do that thing at the estate with the brick archways? I nodded. He smirked. Nice. Hope nothing ruins it. There was a beat of silence too long to be accidental. Julia reached under the table and touched my knee. I smiled at Tyler. Yeah, I hope so too. Because in that moment, I knew something he didn't. See, Mark had called me the day after Tyler's job offer was pulled. Not just to confirm, but to ask if I wanted him to pass Tyler's resume around to other firms. I told him not to. But what I didn't tell anyone, not Julia, not even Mark, was that I'd started keeping notes. Quietly, carefully, over the years. Records of every time I'd bailed Tyler out. Transfers, emails, texts, receipts, notes on conversations. Times he'd lied, taken advantage, disrespected me or others. All of it. At first, I saved them out of habit. Then I realized they had power. Because Tyler wasn't just careless. He was reckless. And people like that, they always leave trails. I just needed the right time. And that time was coming. Fast. But before that, Tyler still had one more card to play, one more move to make. And when he did, everything would come crashing down. It started with a phone call from Julia while I was at work. One of those mid-afternoon calls that make your stomach sink before you even answer. I stepped out of my office, pressing the phone to my ear, already bracing. "Hey," I said quickly. "Everything okay?" There was a pause. Then her voice, low and tight. "Did you tell your mom where we're getting the cake?" I blinked. "The cake? The bakery? I know you mentioned it to your brother a while back, but did you tell your mom recently?" "No," I said slowly, walking toward the stairwell for privacy. "Why?" She let out a sharp breath. "Because I just got off the phone with them. Apparently, someone claiming to be me called and canceled our order. Said we'd changed our minds and we're going with someone else." My mouth went dry. "What?" "Yeah. They said the woman was rude. Said she didn't have time to argue and that they should refund the deposit immediately. The only reason they called me was because it didn't sound like me and they wanted to double check." I closed my eyes, hand gripping the stair rail. "Julia?" I didn't want to believe it, but then I checked our wedding planning email account. Someone tried to reset the password last night. It didn't go through. I have two-factor on everything, but they tried. We stood in silence for a second, the reality settling between us. "It was them," I said. "I don't know who exactly," she replied, voice calm but wounded. "But it was someone who doesn't want this wedding to happen the way we planned. Someone who wants to ruin it piece by piece." The call ended soon after. She was on her way to the bakery in person to reassure them we were still on. I offered to leave work, but she told me no, said I should stay calm, that we'd handle it together. But inside, I wasn't calm. I felt something shift in me. Not rage. I'd felt flashes of that before. This was colder. Still. Focused. A different kind of betrayal needs a different kind of response. That night, I drove to my parents' house. Alone. I told myself I wasn't going to accuse anyone outright. I just wanted to ask. To look them in the eye. Tyler was in the garage, pretending to organize a bunch of tools he didn't know how to use. When I walked up, he gave me that fake brother grin he always wore like armor. "Yo, what's up, suit man?" "I have a question," I said. He glanced at me sideways. "Shoot, did you call our bakery?" He paused, just a half second, and that was enough. His mouth opened, but the smirk faltered. "What bakery?" "Our wedding bakery, Tyler." He shrugged. "Why would I do that?" "To cancel the cake." His laugh was too loud, too quick. "You think I care about your stupid cake?" I didn't say anything. I just stared. He wiped his hands on a towel, shook his head. "You're seriously paranoid, man. You think I'm sabotaging your wedding now?" I took a step closer. "If you ever touch anything related to my wedding again, we're done." He tilted his head. "Wow. So that's where we are now? Gonna disown your own brother over a cake?" "I'd disown you over a napkin at this point." He stepped back, arms up. Okay. Relax. I didn't touch your bakery, all right? But maybe your precious little fiancée should double-check her passwords." That was it. He didn't admit it. Not directly, but the grin said enough. The way he said fiancé, like it left a bad taste in his mouth. He wanted me to know. He wanted me to guess and stew, to feel helpless. That was his game. I walked away, got in my car, sat in the driveway with the engine off for 20 minutes. When I got home, Julia was already there. She was on the couch, laptop open, emails pulled up. "Alex," she said, "come look at this." She showed me a trail of activity, failed logins, password reset attempts, even a fake email posing as our venue trying to confirm cancellation. I sat next to her, numb, and then she said something I'll never forget. "This isn't just immaturity anymore. This is sabotage." She was right. The next day, things got worse. Julia's parents had invited us over for dinner. We assumed it was wedding-related, finalizing some details, maybe picking floral arrangements. When we arrived, Mark sat us down with a strange look on his face. He slid his phone across the table. On the screen was a screenshot of an email, sent from a brand new Gmail address. No name, just a burner. Subject, "You should rethink the groom." The message was short, but vicious. A few sentences, laced with lies, about my past, my character, suggesting I had a gambling problem. I've never gambled a day in my life. That I'd cheated on Julia in college, also a lie. And that I'd only ever used her to get close to powerful people. No proof. No signature. But Mark wasn't stupid. "Did you do anything recently," he asked calmly, "that might have made someone upset?" Julia looked at me. I looked at the floor. Mark leaned back. We traced the IP. It was sent from your parents' neighborhood. That's as far as we could get. The world went quiet in my head for a moment. They didn't just mess with my suit or my cake. They tried to turn her family against me. This wasn't sibling rivalry anymore. This was war. That night, I opened my locked Dropbox folder. The one I hadn't touched in years. The one labeled just in case. I scrolled past old transfers, IOUs, saved text conversations, screenshots of Tyler begging for money, even audio clips of him drunk at family gatherings saying things I wish I could forget. But one file caught my eye. A voice memo from 3 years ago. Tyler, laughing, saying, "I could burn Alex's life down in a day if I wanted. Dude's too nice to fight back." I stared at it for a long time, and I realized I wasn't too nice anymore. Because this wasn't about the job, or the cake, or the wedding. This was about trust, shattered, stomped on, and mocked. And now? Now it was my turn. But first, I needed one more piece of confirmation. One final trigger. And Tyler, true to form, gave it to me in the most spectacularly stupid way possible, by going after Julia directly, publicly, at a family brunch the following weekend, while she was pouring orange juice, in front of everyone. And what he said, that was the moment everything finally broke. The brunch was supposed to be low-key, just a casual get-together at my parents' place, with bagels, fruit platters, and lukewarm coffee. It was the kind of thing Mom threw together whenever she wanted to pretend everything was fine, as if by forcing everyone into the same room with cinnamon rolls, she could glue the cracks shut with frosting. Julia didn't want to go. After the bakery sabotage, the email to her dad, and the growing storm of stress swirling around our wedding, she was exhausted, emotionally, mentally, and physically. But she also didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing us flinch. So we went. We agreed to stay no longer than an hour, say our hellos, eat our muffins, and leave. For a while, things were bearable. My mom chirped on about flower arrangements and seating charts, carefully avoiding any mention of the recent chaos. Dad watched the news on low volume, only looking up to refill his coffee. Tyler was unusually quiet. He hadn't cracked a single joke or made a single jab. If anything, he seemed amused, like he knew something we didn't. Then Julia got up to pour herself a glass of orange juice. She was mid-pour when Tyler, leaning back in his chair like he owned the world, casually said, "So, Julia, how's your ex?" The entire room froze. Even the TV news anchor paused on a still frame like he couldn't believe what he'd just heard. Julia blinked. "Excuse me." Tyler smiled wide, eyes twinkling with mischief. "Your ex, the one from college. What was his name again? Liam? Pretty sure I saw him comment on one of your Instagram photos the other day. Little heart emoji, wasn't it?" The orange juice stopped midstream. Julia slowly put the pitcher down. "What are you talking about?" Tyler shrugged, still grinning. "I just find it interesting that you're so close with old flames. Like, if I were about to marry someone, I'd probably block all my exes, not swap flirty comments with them." I stared at him, heart pounding. I could see what he was doing. He was trying to stir doubt, plant seeds. Not just in Julia's mind, in everyone's. Julia stared at him for a second, then said, coldly, "You went through my social media?" Tyler leaned forward like a game show host revealing a prize. "Nah, just happened to be scrolling through mutuals. I mean, your account's public, right? Anyone can see it." Mom, looking uncomfortable, cut in. "Tyler, that's enough." "No, it's not," he said, cutting her off. "I'm just saying, if the roles were reversed and Alex's ex-girlfriends were leaving hearts on his photos, I bet the whole table would have something to say." Julia opened her mouth, but I stood up before she could speak. "Don't," I said to her, voice low. "He's doing this on purpose." Tyler raised his eyebrows. "Touchy, touchy." I turned to Mom. "Did you know he was going to do this?" She looked genuinely panicked. "I had no idea, I swear." "Of course she didn't," Tyler said, still smiling. "It's not like I needed help to notice something sketchy." I turned back to him. "You're pathetic." He smirked. "And you're a doormat. Always have been." Julia took my hand. "Let's go." I nodded. We left. No goodbyes, no excuses. Just the sound of the screen door slamming behind us. Back in the car, she didn't cry. She didn't yell. She just stared straight ahead, face hard. "He's not trying to ruin the wedding," she said flatly. "He's trying to ruin us." She was right. This wasn't sabotage anymore. It was something deeper. Obsessive. Tyler didn't just want to hurt me. He wanted to hollow me out, to take everything I cared about and smear it, crack it, dismantle it in slow motion. That was my rock bottom. Not just because of what he'd said, but because for the first time, I saw the toll it was taking on Julia. She wasn't just hurt. She was tired. Of my family. Of always having to be the bigger person. Of watching me try to keep the peace while we got sucker punched over and over again. I couldn't protect her anymore by staying quiet. Silence wasn't noble, it was enabling. That night, we didn't talk much. I sat in our home office while Julia went to bed early, drained. I looked around at our wedding plans, the mood boards, the guest lists, the little color swatches pinned on the wall. All these fragile things we'd built, just waiting for someone like Tyler to stomp on. So I made a decision. I opened my Dropbox again, this time with a different purpose. I started organizing the files, separating them by year, by incident, by format. Every bank transfer I made to cover Tyler's car repairs. Every email he sent me asking for money, just this once. Screenshots of text messages where he threatened to expose me to my bosses after I refused to bail him out of a failed side hustle. The photos of my dented car from when he borrowed it without permission and sideswiped a fence, then blamed a stranger in a parking lot. Audio clips where he bragged to his friends about milking me for years because Alex doesn't know how to say no. I labeled the folder, Insurance. And then I started a second folder. This one was for strategy. Contacts. People who knew Tyler from college. People he owed money to. Former co-workers who quit his old jobs in frustration. One even filed an HR complaint. I hadn't cared before. I care now. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was preparation. Because I realized something as I sorted through every little receipt, every tiny insult I'd brushed off over the years. Tyler thought I was soft. He mistook patience for weakness, kindness for submission, boundaries for bridges he could burn. But I wasn't the same person anymore. I wasn't trying to fix him. I wasn't trying to earn my family's approval. I was planning my exit. And the only question left was whether I wanted to walk away quietly or take everything down with me. And right on cue, Tyler gave me the answer himself. 2 nights later, Julia's engagement ring, the one she left in the bathroom while washing her hands, vanished. And that was when I finally stopped holding back. The night the ring disappeared, everything changed. Julia wasn't the dramatic type. She didn't scream. She didn't throw things or call the police in a panic. She just stood there in the doorway of the bathroom, her hands trembling slightly, eyes wide with disbelief. I just set it down, she whispered. Right here. I always put it on the tray. I never leave it anywhere else. We searched everywhere. Tore the place apart. Trash cans, sink drain, vacuum bag, couch cushions. We checked our security camera footage, but the indoor cams only covered the entryways and common rooms. Nothing showed anyone entering or leaving. Julia hadn't even gone out that day. I knew what had happened. So did she. But we didn't say it out loud. Not yet. Instead, I emailed our building's manager and requested all front door keycard logs for the past 2 days. Our apartment complex kept a record of every resident entry and exit tied to a digital fob. My hands were cold as I scrolled through the spreadsheet he sent. There it was. The entry. Tyler's fob. The timestamp matched a 2-hour window when Julia had stepped out to grab groceries and I was still at work. He'd been here. He still had the guest fob from months ago. He'd never returned it. I'd forgotten about it. The next morning, I filed a police report. Not because I expected them to recover the ring. I knew it was already gone. Sold. Pawned. Traded for some dumb motorcycle part or a weekend bar tab. I filed it because I needed documentation. That same day, I went into work early. I'd been holding onto a promotion opportunity for months, unsure if I should throw my hat in the ring. It was a director-level role, 1 step below partner, the kind of job that came with more visibility, more control, and more hours. Before, I'd hesitated. I was planning a wedding, trying to keep things balanced. But now I needed leverage. I walked into my boss's office and laid it out plainly. I was ready. More than ready. I brought a portfolio of my work, a breakdown of revenue growth from clients I'd managed, and a concise plan for how I'd improve team performance in the next 2 quarters. He nodded slowly as he flipped through it. You've been flying under the radar for too long, Alex. I won't anymore, I said. A week later, I got the call. The promotion was mine. I'd be managing 2 teams, overseeing client operations, and, best of all, I'd have access to a few new high-level business circles. The kind of places where people like my future father-in-law didn't just exist, they thrived. That same week, Julia got an offer from a marketing firm she'd been eyeing for years. Higher pay, full creative control, remote flexibility. It came out of nowhere. A recruiter had reached out based on a campaign she'd worked on last fall. She almost turned it down. Too much stress lately. Too much noise. But I told her the truth. Take it. Let's start saying yes to the things we've earned. We were rising. Quietly, steadily. The world didn't notice right away, but we felt it. The shift. Our wedding plans moved forward. Julia's dad doubled down on his support. After the email stunt, he'd hired a private IT security consultant to comb through everything digital tied to our wedding. He even offered to fund an entirely new venue and planning team if we wanted to cut the family out completely. We declined, not because we forgave them, but because we had a different plan. You see, something else happened in the background while our lives were improving. People started talking. Remember that file I'd made, the one labeled insurance? I didn't publish it. I didn't post it online or send it to family members in a dramatic mass email. I leaked it, slowly, carefully, to exactly the right people. Tyler's former employer? The one he claimed ghosted him? I knew a guy there, an old college friend who now worked in HR. I sent a few screenshots. Nothing aggressive. Just a friendly heads up about a potential rehiring conflict. Julia's friend from law school worked at a firm where Tyler had recently applied for a consulting position. I made sure she received a copy of the voice memo where Tyler bragged about conning his way into high-paying roles. Then there was the motorcycle dealership, the one where he'd been trying to get financing for a new custom build, bragging about it on his Instagram stories. I sent the owner a polite anonymous tip, linking a few financial red flags tied to Tyler's name. He got blacklisted from their finance program the next day. No drama, no confrontation, just doors quietly closing around him. Meanwhile, I reached out to the local jeweler association and discreetly offered a reward for any information about a distinctive emerald-cut engagement ring with a vintage setting, one that matched Julia's stolen one exactly. And finally, the one that made me feel something close to peace. I called our building manager and asked him to audit all fob activity for the last 6 months. Not just ours, everyone's. Because I had a theory, one I hadn't said out loud. What if this wasn't the first time? What if the ring wasn't the only thing Tyler had taken? The manager hesitated but eventually agreed. And when he called me back 4 days later, his voice was grim. Alex, your brother's fob was used multiple times during hours neither of you were home. One time, 2 hours after your cleaning lady logged out. Another, the day your router mysteriously crashed. I thanked him, hung up, sat in silence for a long time. Then I opened my laptop and began typing. A letter. To Tyler. Not a threat. Not even a confrontation. Just a list. Of everything I knew. Everything I had. Everything I could do. And hadn't yet. I didn't send it. Not then. But I printed a copy. And slipped it into an envelope. Because I was going to hand deliver it. At the exact moment he least expected it. And that moment was coming sooner than he thought. Because he'd just RSVP'd to our wedding. And brought a +1. A name I recognized. His new girlfriend. Who just happened to work at the same firm where I'd been promoted. And she didn't know a single thing about the man she was dating. I waited. That was the hardest part. Not acting. Not confronting. Not snapping at the dinner table or lashing out over text. Just waiting. Watching. Letting Tyler think he still had the upper hand. Letting him assume I was still the same older brother he could poke and prod without consequence. The guy who'd always smooth things over for the sake of family. But while he posted filtered selfies with his new girlfriend, captioned, leveling up 100 points, I was building something. Power, in this world, doesn't always come with fireworks or big titles. It comes in whispers, in leverage, in information. And I had plenty of it. Let's start with her, his new girlfriend, Marissa. On the surface, she was impressive, a polished, rising star consultant at one of the region's fastest-growing firms. She spoke 3 languages, had degrees from 2 elite universities, and, here's the kicker, was recently transferred to a client-facing role for a major account. One of my accounts. The moment I saw her name in an email thread for a high-profile project I'd just taken over, my pulse kicked up a notch. Not out of fear, but clarity. This wasn't coincidence. This was opportunity. I kept things professional, courteous. I even complimented her in a team-wide email after she'd pitched a solid idea in a brainstorming session. It caught her off guard. She responded kindly. No reason not to. I hadn't done anything yet. But she didn't know who I was. Not really. Tyler hadn't told her, which made sense. Why mention the boring big brother when he could spin some story about a solo climb through the corporate world? I let the threads connect themselves. Then one day, I accidentally let a meeting run a little long and struck up casual conversation afterward. She asked where I was from. I mentioned the city. She said it sounded familiar. I said I had a younger brother, Tyler. Her smile faltered. Wait, Tyler, last name. I nodded. That's him. She blinked, clearly computing. Wow. Small world. Very, I said. He's definitely memorable. She laughed awkwardly. Yeah, he is. He's told me a bit about you. Oh. I tilted my head. I'm curious. What did he say? She hesitated, just a second too long. Just, that you're successful, driven, that you're the reason he tries so hard. That last part almost made me laugh. Try so hard. Tyler had never tried at anything unless there was a shortcut. But I didn't show it. I just smiled politely, like an older brother full of quiet pride. Then I changed the subject and walked away, but not before dropping one last comment. By the way, I think it's great that you're with someone who values ambition. That can be rare. That planted the seed. From there, it spread on its own. A few days later, I got a Slack message from her, a follow-up about the project. But then, a second message. Mind if I ask you something off the record? I told her to go ahead. She hesitated, then typed. Is it true Tyler never finished college? Oh, so the cracks were forming. I didn't answer directly. I just sent a link to a news article from 4 years ago, a police blotter. A bar fight involving a Tyler, last name. No charges pressed. Just a mention. But enough. She thanked me. Didn't ask anything else. I didn't need to say more. The point wasn't to destroy him yet. It was to dismantle the illusion he'd built around himself, piece by piece, quietly, invisibly, until there was nothing left to stand on. But that wasn't the only play I was making. With the wedding approaching, I knew Tyler would try something big. He'd sabotaged the cake, tried to smear my reputation, stolen from my fiancée, and invaded our apartment. He wasn't going to sit quietly in a tux and clap politely. That wasn't who he was. So I made a decision, one that surprised even me. I invited him to be part of the ceremony. Not as best man, no. That honor went to my oldest friend, Marcus, who'd seen me through college, career launches, and every one of Tyler's disasters. But I offered Tyler a reading. Just a short speech, a quote, really, to be read during the ceremony. I framed it as an olive branch. He took the bait. Wow, he said over the phone, smug and suspicious. Didn't think you had it in you. I'm turning a new leaf, I told him. He laughed. Don't go soft on me, bro. Oh, if only he knew. You see, the wedding would be my stage. But the real revenge wasn't public. That was just the curtain call. The real work was already in motion. With help. 2 days after inviting Tyler to speak, I met with Julia's father, Mark, for lunch. We didn't go to a flashy restaurant or a stuffy steakhouse. We met at a quiet little cafe near his office. Neutral territory. I want to ask a favor, I said once we sat down. Mark set down his cup. Anything. I need to know if your firm still works with financial investigations. He raised an eyebrow. For corporate fraud? For personal patterns, I said carefully. I'm not asking you to break laws. Just, if you can help me verify certain transactions. Quietly, he stared at me a moment, then nodded slowly. Send me what you have. So I did. Every bank transfer, every Venmo, every PayPal receipt to Tyler over the last 8 years. Thousands of dollars, always with a story. Rent shortfalls, phone bill emergencies, tuition lies, car repairs that didn't exist. Each one now organized, time-stamped, and cross-referenced with his social media posts. Half the time, while I was paying off his late utilities, he was at festivals or flashing bottle service on his Instagram stories. Mark called me 3 days later. You weren't exaggerating, he said flatly. He's been laundering favors from you into appearances. But that's not the worst of it. I waited. He's been using your name on several of his credit references. I went cold. What? He didn't list your social, but he's implied co-signing. I've got at least 2 credit applications flagged where he used your employer and job title, likely to boost his approval odds. I couldn't speak for a moment. Can you get documentation? I finally asked. I already did. And just like that, I had everything I needed. Proof of financial deception. Proof of identity manipulation. A motive. a timeline, a pattern, and a file, now growing, that I could hand to every hiring manager, bank officer, or professional connection Tyler ever tried to con again. The rise wasn't about punishing him in one explosive moment. It was about surrounding him with a wall of quiet consequences he couldn't escape from. Brick by brick. By the time he realized it, I'd be long gone. And just like that, with the wedding 2 weeks away and Tyler fully confident that he was back in my good graces, I sealed the final envelope. The one with all the evidence. The one with the letter. The one he'd open on the morning of my wedding. But not until after he gave his speech. Because I wanted the world to hear the story he rehearsed. Right before they saw who he really was. The morning of the wedding was calm. Almost too calm. Julia woke up first. I heard her padding around the suite in her slippers, humming softly as she brewed coffee. There was no sign of nerves in her voice, no tension in her posture, just grace. We'd decided not to do the whole "don't see the bride before the ceremony" thing. We weren't superstitious. Besides, this was a partnership built on trust, not tradition. The sky was a crisp blue outside the arched windows of the estate. The venue had come together beautifully, soft cream florals lining the aisle, sunlight flooding through the courtyard, and candles waiting to be lit as dusk approached. The planner had outdone herself. The guests were already trickling in. My friend Marcus was downstairs, greeting family and helping coordinate last-minute logistics. Everything felt right, and that's what made it so perfect. Because Tyler didn't know he was walking into the most controlled moment of his life. He arrived late, naturally, 15 minutes before the ceremony, wearing an ill-fitted tux that clearly wasn't tailored. His hair was slicked back too aggressively, and he looked like he hadn't slept in a day. But he was smiling, confident, buzzing with the energy of someone who thought he had something planned. He greeted everyone loudly, cracked a joke about the catering staff, hugged my mother dramatically, and gave Julia a wink that made my jaw clench, but I held my smile. "Speech ready?" I asked him as we crossed paths by the bar. He grinned. "You'll love it. Thought I'd keep it real, you know." "Oh, I'm counting on it," I said. The ceremony began right on time. The music swelled. My heart raced when Julia stepped into view. She looked radiant, doesn't even cover it. She was glowing, grounded, unshakable, like someone who had walked through fire and emerged perfectly intact. And in that moment, I felt something deeper than love. I felt resolve. No more hiding. No more letting people walk all over me because it was easier than causing waves. Today wasn't just about marriage. It was about closure. The ceremony moved along beautifully. Vows were exchanged. Rings were placed. There wasn't a dry eye in the crowd when Julia whispered, "You're my piece." And then, as planned, the officiant smiled and said, "Before we pronounce this couple, they've invited a family member to share a special reading." Tyler stood up from the second row, smirking. He walked slowly up to the mic, adjusted his cuffs like he was about to give a TED Talk, and cleared his throat. "Love is patient," he began, adopting a faux reverent tone. "Love is kind. It does not envy. It does not boast. It is not proud." I watched him from the corner of my eye. Every word was delivered with a glint of irony. He wasn't reading scripture. He was mocking it, trying to come off as clever, subtle, winking at the people who didn't know him, waiting for his moment to twist the knife. And that's when it happened, right as he reached the line. It keeps no record of wrongs. A member of the staff walked up and handed him a sleek black envelope. He blinked, confused. Thanks." He glanced toward the back of the crowd, then back down at the envelope. "Is this a bit?" he asked, laughing awkwardly. "Y'all doing props now?" The officiant shook her head gently. "Please continue." But Tyler didn't. He opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, nothing more. I watched his eyes scan it, first with confusion, then alarm, then dawning horror. Because what he was reading was everything. A bullet point summary of every transfer, every lie, every manipulation, neatly cataloged, sourced, and dated. At the bottom was a simple line. This was never about revenge. This was about truth. Read this carefully before your next job interview. Hey. His face turned pale. He looked up, looked straight at me. I raised my glass, just a half inch, and gave him the smallest nod. And then he bolted. No dramatic exit. No screaming. Just turned and power walked down the aisle like a man trying not to vomit at his own sentencing. The crowd murmured. A few relatives shifted in their seats. But no one really reacted. Not yet, because the Real show came later. At the reception, I made a quiet announcement. Just a brief toast. I know many of you noticed my brother's early departure, I said, voice calm measured. There's no need for concern. He just received some overdue reading material. A few people laughed politely. I continued. I believe weddings are about truth, about choosing who stands beside you in the years to come. And sometimes, the hardest part of growing up is realizing which family you were born into and which one you build. That landed. Applause broke out. Julia squeezed my hand. But that wasn't the end. The real payoff happened over the next week. Tyler's girlfriend, Marissa, broke up with him 2 days after the wedding. Word got around that she found some inconsistencies in his stories. Apparently, she also received an anonymous email containing a few screenshots, ones I hadn't used publicly, but had held back in case she ever wanted answers. She did. One by one, the walls closed in. The job applications? Stalled. The motorcycle financing? Revoked. The wedding guests? Talking. Tyler stopped posting on social media. His name faded from family conversations. Even my mom, for once, didn't try to defend him. She just sighed and said, I never thought it would come to this. And I looked her in the eye and replied, it came to this because I let it. Because that's the truth. For years, I made peace to keep the peace. Until I realized some peace isn't worth keeping. And now? Now I had mine. But one piece of the story still remained. The ring. And when it finally showed up again, weeks later, it brought one final twist that even I didn't see coming. The ring was mailed back in a plain padded envelope, no return address. It arrived on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, tucked between wedding cards and a Bed Bath & Beyond gift receipt. No note, no apology, just the cold weight of the emerald-cut diamond in Julia's palm as we stood in the kitchen, staring at it in silence. For a moment, neither of us said anything. Then Julia smiled, a small, tired smile. He finally realized he can't sell what doesn't belong to him. We didn't report it. The police case had already been closed. The evidence was still in our files, and the detective said if we ever wanted to press charges, we could. But honestly, we didn't need to, because the real punishment was already unfolding. Tyler vanished from social media within a week. Deleted everything. No more gym selfies, no rise and grind quotes, no stories from rooftop bars. Just gone. His friends stopped mentioning him. A few mutual acquaintances reached out to me quietly, asking, hey, did something happen? I never answered directly. I didn't need to. I heard through the grapevine that he'd been turned down by 3 firms in a row, ones that had originally shown interest. Apparently, someone had flagged his application for inconsistent work history, and those financial institutions he used to brag about scamming for personal loans? They started calling. Hard. His girlfriend, ex now, moved to another city. Took a new job. Blocked him on everything. The last time I saw Tyler was at our parents' house 3 months later at a barely attended family barbecue. He looked thin, tired, worn down in a way that went deeper than exhaustion. He avoided my eyes most of the afternoon, kept to himself near the grill, and didn't say much. Eventually, I walked over. He didn't look up. You got everything you wanted, he muttered, voice low and bitter. I shook my head. No, I got everything you tried to ruin, and kept it. He flinched, like the words stung. Maybe they did. Maybe he thought I'd gloat, or forgive him, or offer a truce. But I didn't. Some bridges don't burn. They just rot slowly until no one can stand on them anymore. That was the last time we spoke. Life moved on. Julia and I bought a new place across town, one with a little garden and an office she turned into a studio. She hung the ring in a shadow box on the wall, not as a reminder of what happened, but as a symbol of what didn't break us. My career flourished. Her new job gave her the freedom she'd always wanted. We traveled, hosted dinners with chosen family, and built something real, not because we were lucky, but because we stopped letting people treat us like they owned pieces of our peace. As for my parents, the silence grew. They stopped asking why I didn't show up to birthdays or group chats. Maybe deep down, they knew. Maybe part of them had always known. It's hard to mourn a relationship that was always one-sided. But the best part? 1 year to the day after our wedding, I received a letter. Handwritten. No return address. Just 2 words scrawled in shaky ink. You win. I didn't respond. I folded the letter, slid it into the back of the shadow box behind the ring, and closed the glass door gently. Because it was never about winning. It was about finally being free. And sometimes, the the sweetest revenge is silence. I never thought my wedding day, the day that was supposed to be the happiest of my life, would turn out like this. And the worst part? My own family was the enemy. For some context, my name is Olivia, and my stepsister, Rachel, has always been the golden child. My dad remarried when I was 10, and from the moment Rachel and her mother entered our lives, I was an afterthought. Rachel got whatever she wanted, whether it was my toys as a kid or my parents' support as an adult. When I got engaged to my fiancé, Ethan, I stupidly thought that maybe, just maybe, Rachel would be happy for me. Oh, how wrong I was. That it all started with little things. Rachel made passive-aggressive comments about my ring, saying Ethan could have done better. She scoffed at my dress, saying it was too basic. But I shrugged it off. Not worth the fight, right? Then she announced her engagement to a guy she had only been dating for 4 months. And her wedding date? The exact same day as mine. At first, I thought it was a joke. Rachel, you know that's my wedding day, right? She smirked. Yeah, but I figured one of us should have a wedding worth attending. I looked at my dad and stepmom, expecting them to shut this down. But nope. They beamed at her like she had just cured cancer. Well, sweetheart, my dad said. You know Rachel has always dreamed of a spring wedding. I nearly choked. I booked my venue over a year ago. You can't just, but my stepmom cut in. I think you should be more understanding, Olivia. You've always been so competitive with Rachel. Maybe it's time you let her have a moment. I was speechless. Ethan, bless his heart, was livid, but I just walked away. I wasn't going to let her get to me. Then came the real sabotage. A week before my wedding, I got a call from my venue. They apologized and said there had been a double booking. I was confused until they mentioned Rachel's name. She what? I whispered. She booked the venue under her name, and since she paid in full yesterday, we assumed. I hung up and stormed to my dad's house, shaking with rage. You let her steal my venue? Rachel smirked from the couch. You really should have paid in full earlier, Liv. I turned to my dad. You knew about this? He sighed. Rachel was willing to pay more, and the venue needed the money. I could not believe what I was hearing. You mean you paid for it? Unbelievable. I left before I could scream. I'd find a solution, even if it meant getting married in my backyard. But Rachel wasn't done. The night before my wedding, I stayed at a hotel. When I got back to my apartment the next morning to pick up my dress, my stomach dropped. The bag was on the floor, the zipper ripped open, and my dress? It had been slashed to shreds that I don't even know how I moved for the next few minutes. I just knew one thing. Rachel was behind this. Then my phone rang. It was my dad. Honey, Rachel told us what happened. You should really let go of this grudge. My vision went red. You think I did this? He sighed. Well, she said you were acting out, and you always did have a temper. That was it. That was the moment I knew my family had chosen her. I was done. I wiped my tears, squared my shoulders, and did something no one saw coming. And when they saw me on the news the next day, they came running to my house. Too bad for them. I had already moved on. I should have been breaking down, crying, screaming. But instead, I felt calm. Rachel thought she won. My dad and stepmom thought they could brush this under the rug. But they had no idea what was coming. I made a few calls. I wasn't going to let Rachel ruin my wedding. I was going to turn this whole disaster into something they would never forget. First, I needed a new venue. I was lucky. One of Ethan's friends owned a beautiful private estate. When I explained what happened, he insisted we use it for free. That was one problem solved. Second, the dress. There was no fixing what Rachel had done, but I wasn't about to let her see me fall apart. So I called a designer boutique in town and told them my story. One of the employees gasped, "Wait, you're the bride whose dress got destroyed?" I saw the pictures on social media. That's insane. Pictures? Oh yeah. Someone posted about it in a wedding drama Facebook group. It's blowing up. I hadn't even thought about that. But if my story was already spreading, why not use it to my advantage? Within hours, a local designer offered to make me a dress overnight. She even sent a message. Let's make you look like a queen. Free of charge. At this point, I almost wanted to send Rachel flowers for being so evil. It was working in my favor. Now for the real fun. Rachel had stolen my venue, but she wasn't expecting what came next. See, while she was busy playing bride, she hadn't noticed that someone had tipped off the local news about a bridezilla who sabotaged her own sister's wedding. And guess who loved a juicy scandal? The media. The morning of her wedding, Rachel woke up to see her name everywhere. Bride accused of sabotaging sister's wedding. Stole venue. Ruined dress. There were photos of my shredded gown, texts from mutual friends calling her out, and even screenshots of her bragging in a group chat about how I deserved it. By noon, hashtag Rachel the Wicked Bride was trending. But the best part? Her dream venue, my venue, canceled on her. Turns out, they didn't love being at the center of a viral scandal. She was furious that I heard later that she showed up in her dress, screaming at the staff. They told her to leave before they called security. Her guests, seeing the drama unfold live, started bailing. And while all of this was happening, I was having the wedding of my dreams. The estate was stunning. The new dress was even better than my original, and everyone who actually loved me was there. The cherry on top? A famous influencer had shared my story, and a few local celebrities showed up just to support me. So when my dad and stepmom finally came knocking at my door, looking panicked, I already knew why. Rachel was begging them to fix the mess. The golden child had finally lost, and now they needed me. Too bad for them that I opened the door, standing there in my stunning gown, glowing with happiness, and I just smiled. Sorry, I said sweetly. I don't think I know you. Then I shut the door in their faces. It was satisfying. The look of absolute shock on my dad's face? Priceless. For years, they had treated me like a second-class citizen in my own family. Now they wanted to act like I was the villain for refusing to clean up Rachel's mess? Absolutely not. Ethan, my wonderful actual family, wrapped his arms around me as I walked back inside. How does it feel? He asked, smirking. I grinned. Like justice. But oh, Reddit. This was far from over. Over the next few days, Rachel's life imploded. First, her fiancé, remember him? Yeah, turns out he wasn't thrilled to find out that his bride-to-be was trending for being a vindictive psycho. He dumped her. Over text. According to my sources, aka mutual friends who couldn't wait to spill the tea, he wrote something along the lines of, I don't know who you are anymore. I'm embarrassed to be associated with you. I hope the attention was worth it. Rachel lost it. She tried calling, texting, even showing up at his job, but he wanted nothing to do with her. Then came the job situation. See, Rachel worked in event planning. You know, weddings. She had been bragging for years about how she wanted to open her own business, how she was going to be the next big name in high-end wedding planning. Well, guess what? Not only did her employer fire her for unprofessional conduct, but her name was toxic in the industry. No one wanted to work with the woman who ruined her own sister's wedding. Venues blacklisted her. Clients pulled out. She became that name in wedding circles, synonymous with drama and disaster. Poetic, really. The parents try to make amends now. You'd think my dad and stepmom would finally wake up, right? Realize they had backed the wrong horse. Nope. Instead, they doubled down. A week after the wedding, I got a long, dramatic email from my dad. Olivia, we need to talk. I don't know where we went wrong, but the way you treated us at your wedding was unacceptable. You humiliated your sister, and now she's struggling. Don't you think you've made your point? Oh. This was rich. I took a deep breath and typed back, Dad, where you went wrong? That started when you let Rachel walk all over me for years. When you watched her steal my venue, ruin my dress, and did nothing. You don't get to play the victim now. If you want to talk, you can start by apologizing. Until then, I have nothing to say to you. And I hit send. The response? Silence. It took months for my dad to reach out again. And by then, well, things had changed in a way they never saw coming. A few months passed, and my life had never been better. Ethan and I had settled into our new home, and I was surrounded by people who actually loved and supported me. My job was going great, and I was still getting messages from strangers who had followed my story online, cheering me on. Rachel, on the other hand, was in free fall. After her fiancé dumped her, she tried playing the victim, spinning the narrative that she was just trying to teach me a lesson and that I had overreacted. But no one was buying it. Her ex-fiancé blocked her, and when she tried dating again, well, let's just say Google wasn't her friend. Her name was still attached to the wedding disaster. Anyone who searched for her would find articles, social media posts, and screenshots exposing her for exactly who she was. She even tried making a new wedding planning business under a fake name, but that fell apart when someone recognized her and blasted her online. My dad and stepmom weren't doing much better. With Rachel practically unemployable and still living at home, they were stuck footing the bill for everything. I heard through a relative that my dad had started complaining about ungrateful daughters and how I had ruined the family. Funny, considering I was the one they abandoned. Then, one evening, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number, but something told me to pick up. Hello. A pause. Then, a voice I hadn't heard in a long time. Olivia. It's Dad. I let the silence stretch out, waiting for him to speak. He sighed. I think we need to talk. About everything. I should have felt something, relief, anger, sadness. But all I felt was a strange sort of finality. Like I had already moved on. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I glanced across the room at Ethan, who was watching me with quiet support, and at the framed wedding photo on the wall, the one where I was truly happy, surrounded by the people who actually cared. Then, I took a slow breath and said, I don't think we do. And I hung up. The silence after I hung up felt heavier than I expected. I sat there for a moment, my phone still in my hand, my heart steady. It wasn't like I thought I'd feel guilty. I knew I didn't owe my father anything, but there was a strange weight in realizing just how final that moment was. I had spent my entire life trying to prove my worth to him, trying to earn the love and approval he so freely handed to Rachel. And now, for the first time, I wasn't chasing it. I wasn't waiting for him to finally see me, to finally choose me. I had chosen myself. Ethan sat next to me on the couch, his arm resting against mine. He didn't push, didn't ask what was said. He just let me sit in the quiet for a moment. Then, after a deep breath, I turned to him and smiled. Let's go get some ice cream. That was it. No deep conversation, no long analysis of my father's intentions or Rachel's downfall. Just a simple decision to do something for myself, with the person who actually mattered. And that was when I knew I had truly moved on. But my father and Rachel? They weren't done. Not yet. A week later, I got an email from my stepmother. I almost deleted it without reading it. But curiosity got the better of me. I clicked it open, expecting some guilt trip, some demand that I fix things. Instead, it was long, rambling, and filled with passive-aggressive undertones so thick I could practically hear her voice in my head. Olivia, I don't know why you're doing this. Your father is devastated. Rachel has been suffering enough, and it's cruel of you to abandon your family when we need to be sticking together. Your wedding stunt already embarrassed us, and you've made things so much worse by refusing to talk. We are still your family, no matter how much you try to erase us. I don't know if this is your way of punishing us, but it's childish. Please, let's just put all this behind us. Come to dinner next Sunday. Let's talk like adults. I scoffed, shaking my head as I read it. They wanted to talk now? After everything? After they let Rachel walk all over me for years, after they abandoned me on my wedding day, after they chose her over me again and again, they suddenly wanted to act like we were just one big, happy family. And what was this about my wedding stunt? Did they really believe that I was the one who caused a scene? I could already picture that dinner. My dad sitting stiffly at the table, my stepmom clutching her wine glass, Rachel sulking like a spoiled child who still thought she deserved an apology. They wouldn't want to talk. They would want me to forgive them without them taking any accountability. I wasn't interested. I showed the email to Ethan, who read it over and exhaled sharply through his nose, shaking his head. They're unbelievable. I know, I muttered. I don't even know why I opened it. Are you going to respond? I thought about it for a moment, then smirked. Yeah, I think I will. I sat down at my laptop and typed out my response carefully. Stepmom, I appreciate the invitation, but I have no interest in pretending that everything is fine. You and Dad made it clear where you stood when you supported Rachel after she tried to ruin my wedding. I'm not the one who abandoned my family. You abandoned me. If you actually want to have an honest conversation, then you need to start by taking accountability for what happened. Until then, I see no reason to attend a dinner where I will undoubtedly be guilt-tripped and manipulated into forgiving something that has never even been acknowledged. Take care. I hit send and closed my laptop, feeling nothing but relief. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. Just the absolute certainty that I had finally set a boundary I wasn't willing to cross. Ethan pulled me into his arms, kissing the top of my head. I'm proud of you, he murmured. I smiled against his chest. I'm proud of me too. But if I thought that was the last I'd hear from them, I was dead wrong. Because 2 weeks later, Rachel pulled one last stunt, and this time, she had everything to lose. I should have known Rachel wouldn't take my silence as an answer. She never did. For 2 blissfully quiet weeks, I let myself believe that maybe, just maybe, my father, stepmother, and Rachel had finally gotten the message. That they would stew in their own misery, complain about me behind closed doors, and ultimately let it go. I was wrong. IT started with an Instagram message from an old friend I hadn't talked to in years. "Hey, Olivia. I just saw something weird and thought you should know. Is Rachel seriously trying to pass off your wedding as hers?" My stomach twisted as I stared at the message. What the hell was she talking about? I opened the link she had sent me and immediately felt my blood run cold. IT was Rachel's Instagram, a brand new account under a slightly different username than the one she usually used, probably because her real one was still getting dragged through the mud. But the pictures? The pictures were mine.my wedding venue. My decorations. My cake. My dress. She had taken the professional photos from my wedding, the ones Ethan and I had posted online, and was pretending they were hers. I clicked through the posts in shock, reading the captions that made my jaw drop. "The most beautiful day of my life. Still can't believe how perfect this day was. So grateful for all my family and friends who made it magical. Marrying the love of my life was everything I dreamed of and more. Thank you to everyone who supported us." I felt sick. She was insane. IT wasn't just that she was posting my wedding photos. It was that she was trying to rewrite history, to erase the very public disaster she had caused and pretend that she had been the one standing at the altar, that she had been the bride, that the family and friends who abandoned me had been there for her. And the worst part? People were falling for it. There were dozens of comments congratulating her. People saying she looked beautiful, that the wedding was so elegant, that they were so happy for her. I scrolled faster, my hands shaking. It wasn't just strangers. There were comments from mutual friends, from extended family, from people who had ignored me on my actual wedding day. I felt a rush of white-hot anger. She wasn't just stealing my wedding. She was trying to rewrite history in a way that made her the center of attention, that made her look like the perfect bride with a perfect life, while I was supposed to just disappear. Not a chance. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to think. Reacting emotionally wouldn't help. I needed to be smart about this. I took screenshots of everything. Every photo, every caption, every comment. I made sure to save proof that Rachel was not only lying but that other people who had chosen her over me, were going along with it. And then, I decided it was time to return the favor. If Rachel wanted to live in a delusion where she was the perfect bride, I was going to make sure everyone knew the truth. I just needed to make sure it hurt. I took my time crafting my response. I wasn't just going to call Rachel out, I was going to obliterate her. First, I sent the screenshots to a few of my real friends, people who had actually been there for me, and asked them to quietly spread the word. Within an hour, the news was already traveling through our social circles like wildfire. Then, I made my move. I opened my Instagram and uploaded a carousel of photos, my wedding photos. But instead of Rachel's fake captions, I wrote the truth. "Hey everyone, imagine my surprise when I found out my stepsister decided to steal my wedding photos and pretend they were hers. For those who don't know, Rachel tried to sabotage my wedding by booking the same venue behind my back and even ripping my wedding dress. When my father and stepmother chose to stand by her, I had to face my wedding day alone. But guess what? I still had the best day of my life because I married the love of my life, surrounded by people who actually cared about me." Apparently, that wasn't enough for Rachel. Now, she's pretending she got married that day, using my photos, my venue, and even my dress. I figured it was only fair to set the record straight. So, to everyone who congratulated her, just know, she didn't get married. She wasn't even invited. I tagged Rachel's fake account, along with my father and stepmother, and then I sat back and watched the chaos unfold. Within minutes, my notifications exploded. People were commenting, resharing, messaging me with shock and disgust. Some of the same people who had congratulated Rachel were now furiously backpedaling. But the best part? Rachel's fake wedding account disappeared within the hour. She deleted everything in a panic, probably hoping to escape the humiliation. Too late. Screenshots of her lies were everywhere. People were laughing at her, calling her out, dragging her through the dirt. Some of our mutual friends who had believed her reached out, horrified, trying to apologize to me for their part in it. Even distant relatives, who had ignored my actual wedding, started messaging me, trying to act like they had been on my side all along. I ignored them. Rachel tried to call me. I let it ring. She tried texting me, spewing out half-assed excuses. I was just trying to fix my reputation. But I didn't respond. She didn't deserve a response. And my father? Oh, he finally called too. This time, his voice was furious. How dare you humiliate your sister like this? He seethed. I smiled. You mean like how she humiliated me? Like how you stood by and let her ruin my wedding? This is different. No, Dad. It's not. And guess what? I don't care what you think anymore. Then I hung up, and that was the last time I ever spoke to him. Rachel's reputation never recovered. She became a running joke among our mutual circles, a cautionary tale of what happens when you take things too far. Her social media presence all but disappeared, and she stopped showing up to family events, too ashamed to face everyone. As for me, I moved on with my life, happier than ever. I had a husband who loved me, real friends who supported me, and the sweet satisfaction of knowing that I had taken back everything she tried to steal from me. And that was the real happily ever after. My name's Owen, I'm 29, and if there's one thing I've learned about family reunions, it's that they rarely feel like reunions. They feel like performances. Like everyone shows up in costume, rehearses their best smiles, and claps on cue for whichever cousin or in-law has the family's attention that year. This summer, it was my cousin Brent. Again, it was the first time I'd seen most of them in over a year. Not because I'd been avoiding them, though if I'm being honest, the idea of skipping had crossed my mind more than once, but because I'd been working. Really working. For the past 4 years, I've been climbing my way up through one of the most competitive consulting firms in the city. Long nights, weekends sacrificed, relationships strained. But it finally paid off. Just 2 weeks before the reunion, I got the call. I've been offered a senior strategy role in the London office. Full relocation, 6-figure salary, an apartment in Kensington already lined up. It was the kind of opportunity one used to dream about. But I hadn't told anyone yet. I wanted to wait. Not out of modesty, just survival instinct. I knew how my family operated. News like that? It would land with a thud. My accomplishments always did. Meanwhile, Brent could land a temp job at the mall and they'd throw him a party with balloons and a banner that said, "Our brightest star." Still, I figured maybe this year would be different. Maybe they'd notice I wasn't the same quiet, second-place version of myself I used to be. I showed up in a tailored shirt, brought a nice bottle of wine, and even helped Grandma out of the car. I was trying. Really trying. That effort lasted all of 10 minutes. I had barely set down the wine before Uncle Dean cornered me near the patio. He was smiling, but it had that tight, awkward pull to it, the kind that said, "I'm pretending this isn't going to be offensive." He leaned in like we were co-conspirators and muttered, "Hey, Owen, do me a favor? Maybe don't mention anything big today. Brent's been having a rough patch again. He's still, figuring things out." I blinked. Okay, but I didn't say anything. Dean chuckled like I was being modest. Sure. I just know you've been doing well, and we don't want to overshadow anything. You understand. I didn't, but I nodded anyway, because if I didn't, I'd be painted as the one making a scene. That's how it always went. I'd seen Brent scream at a waiter once over for getting ketchup, and Mom said he was just passionate. I'd forgotten to RSVP to Easter dinner one year, and she called me cold. I spent the next few hours quietly biting my tongue as Brent made the rounds like a washed-up politician. He had that smug air about him again, faux humility mixed with entitlement. He talked loudly about a startup idea he was developing, which sounded suspiciously like reselling vintage sneakers on eBay. Every time someone asked what I'd been up to, I got halfway through still at the firm before they'd pivot to Brent's plans for his brand or how he might be scouted by a sports agency because a friend's cousin once filmed him dunking. I didn't know whether to laugh or lie down. Then came dinner. We'd moved into the backyard, where a long table had been set up under string lights. It was beautiful, I'll give them that. But as the trays of ribs and potato salad came out, Aunt Lisa emerged from the kitchen with a massive cake. I froze. It was white and gold, with the words, "You'll change the world one day," piped across the top in dramatic, curly font. People clapped. They actually clapped. I watched Brent pretend to look bashful while wiping his hands on a napkin like some celebrity in a press room. "Wow," he laughed. "You guys didn't have to do this." I was still staring when someone tapped my shoulder. It was my mom, holding out a stack of paper plates. "Here, honey, can you start passing these out?" I just looked at her. "Why me?" She blinked like the question confused her. "You're good at that kind of thing." "Good at handing out disposable cutlery?" So I did it. Because saying no would have meant another lecture later about how I make everything about me. I smiled, handed out the plates, and tried not to clench my jaw. But then Brent saw me, and of course he had something to say. "Look at Owen, always the helper," he grinned, biting into a piece of cake. At least I didn't waste my 20s chasing a desk job no one cares about. A few people laughed. Not loudly, but enough. My hand tightened around the plate I was holding. I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was tired. Tired in a way that felt older than me. I had spent years building something. Fighting imposter syndrome, working overtime, moving city to city, trying to prove I was more than a backup plan. And here I was, standing in the grass with sugar on my shirt, being mocked by a man-child who once tried to turn his graduation cap into a TikTok app brand. That's when I decided. I let the rest of the evening play out. Smiled when I needed to. Helped clean up empty cans. Even took a few solo pictures for people who asked. But I waited. Because I knew it was coming. The group photo. Every reunion, it was tradition. One big photo of the entire family on the deck. It was my mom's favorite part. She'd posted on Facebook with a caption like, "My heart in one frame," even though half the people in it hadn't spoken in months. So when Grandma stood up and called for everyone to gather, I made sure to be right in the middle of it. They shuffled around, finding their places, Dean and Lisa at the front, Brent near the center of course, arm draped around his mom like he'd just won the Nobel Peace Prize for loafing. The photographer, one of my younger cousins with a DSLR and a YouTube channel, started adjusting the lens. That's when I raised my voice. Just enough to cut through the chatter. "Actually," I said, stepping forward, "before we take this, I wanted to share something." A few heads turned. Brent looked annoyed. Mom gave me a look like I'd better not ruin her precious photo. But I just smiled. I just accepted a new position. Senior strategy consultant. London office. Full relocation. 6 figures. Silence. The real kind. The kind where even the bugs seemed to stop chirping. I scanned the group. Brent's smile faltered. My mother's eyebrows twitched like she was trying to find a reason to be upset but couldn't yet. Uncle Dean cleared his throat. I held up my hand. "Oh, and before anyone asks, no, you're not on my invite list. For anything. Not the going away party. Not the contact list. Not even Christmas cards." Then I stepped off the deck. And the photographer, bless her, still took the picture. That was the moment the mask cracked. The silence didn't end with the click of the camera. It lingered, long and awkward, clinging to the air like humidity before a thunderstorm. I didn't need to look back to know their expressions. They were burned into memory. Brent's stunned half-laugh, trying to pretend I was joking. My mom's eyes wide with that mix of embarrassment and disbelief. Aunt Lisa's hand frozen mid-clap, like she was trying to decide if this was still part of the performance or not. I didn't storm off. I didn't run. That's not how I wanted to play this. I walked slowly across the yard, weaving between lawn chairs and folding tables, past half-eaten ribs and plastic cups of punch. I set my plate down neatly on the buffet table, grabbed my coat from the back of a chair, and nodded a polite goodbye to Grandma. She blinked at me, confused, but didn't say anything. Maybe she sensed it. Whatever this moment was, it wasn't a tantrum. It was a conclusion. By the time I got to my car, my hands were shaking not from nerves, but from the adrenaline you feel when you finally speak the truth you've rehearsed 100 times in the mirror but never had the guts to say aloud. I sat there for a second, staring at the dashboard, heart pounding in my chest like I just sprinted a mile. And then my phone lit up. Brent texted, "Dude, what's wrong with you?" I ignored it. Mom texted, "Can we talk?" Ignored. And Lisa texted, "Was that really necessary?" I turned the phone off. The drive home was a blur. Windows down, wind in my hair, and a hollow ache in my stomach that I couldn't tell was sadness or relief. Maybe both. There's a strange grief in realizing that your family doesn't know you, not really. They know the version of you that fits into their story. The one who hands out plates, who pays quietly, who doesn't steal the spotlight from the real stars of the family. And when you break that mold, even for a moment, it's like you've broken some unspoken pact. The days that followed were eerily quiet. I expected fallout. Maybe a phone call. Maybe a confrontation. But instead, I got the silent treatment. Only this time, I welcomed it. No texts. No guilt-laced check-ins. Just digital crickets. Until the group photo went up. It was Mom, of course. She uploaded it to Facebook 3 days later. Captioned, "So grateful for our beautiful family. One of our best reunions yet." I clicked on it, just to see. There they were, 30-some relatives crammed onto the deck, smiling through tension. Brent dead center. My mom right beside him. A few cousins flashing peace signs. And in the corner, barely noticeable unless you knew to look, was the empty space where I'd been standing before I stepped down. Like a ghost had left the frame. But the real kicker was the comments. Where's Owen? Did he not make it this year? He's probably off doing something amazing. That kid's always been the smart one. I didn't comment. I didn't like the photo, but I did smile. Because as it turned out, I didn't need to say anything. The silence was loud enough. Still, I wasn't done. A clean exit is good. But sometimes, to truly move on, you have to take back more than just your presence. You have to reclaim the power they took for granted. The next morning, I sent an email. Not to my family. To the reunion committee. Yes, we had one. Aunt Rhonda and Uncle Dean were in charge of organizing the annual event, reserving the park, planning the potluck schedule, even coordinating who brought chairs. And for the last 4 years, I'd been the silent donor who helped cover the rental deposit and catered side dishes because Brent's still figuring things out and Lisa's trying to get her Etsy shop off the ground. My message was short. Hi Rhonda, just wanted to let you know I won't be contributing to the reunion fund next year or any year going forward. I wish you all the best, but it's time for someone else to step up. Regards, Owen. It felt clean. Not bitter. Just clear. The response came within hours. Rhonda texted, "Is everything okay? Did something happen? We've always appreciated your generosity." I didn't respond. But the real fun began the following week. My mom finally called. Twice. I let it ring both times. Then she left a voicemail tight, brittle, with that faux-com tone she always used when she knew she was one breath away from yelling. Hi honey, it's Mom. I just wanted to talk about what happened. It really caught everyone off guard. Brent feels terrible. He said he was just joking. And I don't think it was fair to bring up your job like that. In front of everyone, it made things a little tense. But let's not make a big thing out of it, okay? We're family. Call me. I didn't. Not yet. But I did start packing. The move to London was happening fast. My visa was approved, the firm had booked my flight, and my new manager had already invited me out for a welcome dinner the week I arrived. I'd told a few friends, colleagues, even my old college roommate who I hadn't spoken to in years. Everyone was thrilled for me. Everyone except the people who'd spent years pretending I was invisible. A few days later, Brent texted again. Mom says you're not answering her. You can be mad at me, but don't make it about everyone else. I stared at it. The lack of awareness was breathtaking. Like I just stubbed my toe on a monument to entitlement. I typed, deleted, retyped. Finally, I wrote, I'm not mad. I'm just done playing along. Sent. Blocked. That was the last message I sent before the goodbye party invites went out. Carefully curated list. Old friends. A few mentors. My boss. My neighbor who always shoveled my side of the sidewalk in winter. People who showed up. People who mattered. My family wasn't on it. But someone tried to RSVP anyway. That's where things get interesting. The RSVP came through the event site I'd used. Just a casual little portal where guests could confirm attendance, note dietary restrictions, things like that. I'd purposely left it off social media, keeping it private and invite only. But still, someone managed to find the link. The name listed under attending made my stomach tighten for a second before I let out a low, dry laugh. Lisa H. 2 guests. Aunt Lisa. 2 guests. I didn't have to guess who the second was. It was bold, I'll give her that. No message, no apology, not even a pretense of checking in to see if the invitation was intended for her. Just a quiet assumption that she could insert herself wherever attention might gather. A little voice in my head wondered how she'd even gotten the link. Maybe a friend of a friend. Maybe Mom. Maybe Brent himself, still convinced I was bluffing. I hovered over the Remove Guest button. My cursor sat there, unmoving. And then, for the first time in a long time, I allowed myself a moment of real, unfiltered pettiness. I didn't delete the RSVP. I changed it. Lisa H. became waitlist. No message. No alert. Just a quiet status update. She'd find out the night of, standing outside a venue she thought she was entitled to enter, holding a clutch purse and wearing her best fake smile, only to be told her name wasn't on the list. It wasn't about cruelty. It was about clarity. The days leading up to the party were peaceful, which in my family is always the calm before the storm. I spent most of it packing. Books first, always books first. Then clothes, photos, and finally the little things I knew I wouldn't need in London but couldn't bear to throw away. My grandfather's old watch, A letter from a college professor who believed in me before I did. A shoebox filled with rejection letters I kept as fuel. Then, the night before the party, Mom called again. Not a voicemail this time. She showed up. I heard the knock around 9:15 p.m. Sharp, measured, like someone who didn't want to startle but very much wanted to be heard. I looked through the peephole, and there she was, arms crossed, her expression unreadable. I opened the door slowly. "Owen," she said, her tone formal, like she'd practiced this in the car. "Can we talk?" I stepped aside, silently. She walked in, pausing just inside the doorway like she expected me to offer tea. I didn't. She looked around my living room, eyes scanning the packed boxes and the half-rolled-up rug. "You're really going?" I nodded. Wasn't kidding. She sighed and perched herself on the edge of my couch, like she might float back off it at any second. "I'm not here to fight. I want to understand what's going on." I raised an eyebrow. "Now." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I know things haven't always been fair, but you have to understand, Owen, families are complicated. You're strong. You've always been strong. Brent, well, he needed the support more." I tilted my head. "Support? You mean the cake? The fake speeches? The part where you handed me paper plates like I was the caterer?" "That wasn't personal." "It always is," I said quietly. She looked genuinely taken aback. "Owen, you're successful. You've got this amazing job. You're going abroad. You don't need the spotlight the way Brent does." That was the moment it really hit me. The way she framed it. As if success negated the need for dignity. As if achieving something made me less worthy of recognition because I didn't need it, like the others. Like the measure of love was about weakness. Whoever sank lowest got the life preserver. "So what?" I asked. Was I supposed to keep shrinking so Brent could feel taller? Mom didn't answer. She stared at the floor, her hands clasped in her lap, like she was praying for a script to read from. "I've been invisible for years," I continued. "Every reunion, every dinner, every time someone asked what I was up to, you redirected the conversation. Because, God forbid, I made your golden boy feel inadequate." "You're twisting this," she said, eyes flashing now. "You're being cruel." I took a slow breath. "No, Mom. I'm just being honest. For once." She stood up suddenly, and for a second I thought she was going to storm out. But instead, she walked over to one of my boxes and placed her hand on it like it belonged to her. "You didn't tell me you were moving until now. Because I knew what you'd do. You'd make it about you. Or about Brent. Or about how I was hurting the family. We are your family." I met her gaze, steady. "Then you should have acted like it." There was a long pause. The kind that stretched so far, it became permanent. She finally nodded, slowly. "You're angry." "I'm done." She didn't say goodbye. She just left. The party the next day was incredible. It was held at a rooftop lounge downtown. Nothing too flashy, but elegant in that low-key, confident way. Jazz playing softly in the background, a skyline view behind the bar, waiters serving bite-sized appetizers on tiny ceramic spoons. Everyone who showed up wanted to be there. No obligation. No performance. Just people who knew me, supported me, and celebrated the fact that I was finally stepping into my own life. People gave little speeches. Some funny, some heartfelt. One of my former bosses told a story about how I once rewrote an entire proposal over a weekend after a client changed their mind last minute. My old roommate made everyone laugh with a tale about me sleepwalking into the kitchen and making cereal in silence. They all cheered when I raised my glass and toasted to new beginnings. That's when the real surprise happened. The venue manager came over, leaned in close, and said, "There's someone downstairs trying to get in. She says she's your aunt." I smiled. Of course she came. I set my glass down gently and nodded to the venue manager. "Thanks," I said. "Just tell her she's not on the list. And don't let her up." He hesitated, like he expected me to change my mind. Maybe he dealt with enough awkward family drama in his line of work to recognize the look in my eyes, calm, resolute, but hiding 100 unspoken storms. After a second, he gave a respectful nod and walked off. I turned back to the rooftop, where laughter rippled across the crowd like a soft breeze. Someone had just started a story about how I used to rehearse fake interviews in my college dorm mirror with a toothbrush as a mic. I laughed along, but part of me had already shifted, just slightly, into something heavier. I knew this was the right decision. But even when you walk away from people who've hurt you, there's still a weight to cutting the final thread. 20 minutes later, my phone buzzed in my pocket. One new message. "Mom, She said you humiliated her. People were staring. What exactly are you trying to prove, Owen? I stared at it. The words didn't sting. Not anymore. They felt small. Like a tug on a rope that no longer connected us. Because I wasn't trying to prove anything. I already had. I didn't reply. The rest of the night flowed like a dream. Old friends danced to 80s music under string lights. My team from work toasted to conquering the Brits. One of my mentors pulled me aside and said, "They're lucky to have you over there. Don't forget that." I won't lie. I teared up a little. Because it wasn't just the celebration that moved me. It was the fact that for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to earn a seat at the table. I was wanted, seen, respected. Around midnight, I slipped away from the group and stood at the edge of the rooftop, looking out over the city that had shaped me. The streets below buzzed with life, cars, conversations, late-night food trucks, the neon hum of a city that never slept. I thought about all the years I'd spent here, working late, eating takeout at my desk, dragging myself home through snowstorms and heat waves. And now, it was ending. But it didn't feel like loss. It felt like release. The next morning, I woke up to a string of unread messages. Brent, Aunt Lisa, even Uncle Dean had chimed in. Brent, nice job turning a goodbye party into your personal revenge fantasy. Real mature. Lisa, I hope London appreciates your drama because the rest of us are exhausted. Dean, you've made your point, but family is family. Don't burn the bridge completely. That one made me laugh. The bridge was already ash. They just hadn't noticed they were standing in smoke. But what hit hardest was the voicemail from Grandma. She didn't text, never had. She'd always left voicemails like it was still 2006. Her voice cracked a little as she said, "Hi, sweetheart. I heard some things, and I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you. I know it's been hard, and I'm sorry I didn't say that sooner. I don't understand everything that happened, but I understand this. When people show you they don't see you, you're allowed to walk away. I love you, and I hope London gives you what you've always deserved." That was the only message I saved. My flight was on a Tuesday. I didn't tell anyone the exact time, didn't post a story or tweet some dramatic goodbye. I just packed my last bag, locked the apartment door behind me, and stepped into the next chapter. The plane took off just after sunset. I watched the skyline shrink beneath the clouds, my old life growing smaller with every mile. And when the flight attendant brought me a drink and asked what I was heading to London for, I smiled. A promotion, I said. But more than that, peace. A week later, I was settling into my new flat. Sleek little place in South Kensington. The kind of neighborhood where everyone has opinions about cheese and umbrellas. I loved it. One afternoon, after unpacking the last of my books, I decided to walk through Hyde Park. The air smelled different here, like rain and roasted chestnuts. I sat on a bench with a coffee and pulled out my phone, half thinking I'd check in with someone back home. But then I changed my mind. Instead, I opened a blank note and started writing. Not a letter, not a speech, just thoughts, memories, truths I hadn't said out loud. Things like, you are not selfish for leaving a table where you were only ever fed crumbs. You are not cruel for refusing to shrink so others can feel tall. You are not broken just because they didn't know how to love you right. I didn't send it to anyone, but it felt like the right thing to do. A few months later, I heard from Mom again. A postcard this time. Just a picture of the old house with a note on the back. The holidays weren't the same without you. Hope you're doing well. I didn't reply. Because sometimes healing isn't about reuniting. It's about rebuilding, with better tools, stronger materials, and the unwavering belief that you deserve to exist fully. Loudly. Unapologetically. So no, I never went back. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I had to. My name is Alex, I'm 29, and if you asked anyone in my family, they'd probably describe me as the quiet one, or worse, the one who never quite figured it out. I've always been low maintenance, never asked for much. I wasn't the golden child. That title belonged to my older brother, Nathan, who followed Dad into finance, or my younger sister, Rachel, who's practically a professional social butterfly with a Pinterest-perfect life. Me? I went my own way. Built a quiet career in software, mostly remote work, decent pay, and I never bragged about it. I liked living under the radar. But what I didn't realize was that my family didn't just ignore me, they saw me as some kind of joke. It started the way it always does, a text from Mom in the family group chat. Birthday dinner for Alex this Friday. Any suggestions? That part was fine. I even felt a little hopeful. Maybe this year would be different. Maybe they'd remember I don't eat meat, or that I'd mentioned a new place that opened downtown. But then the replies started. Nathan, let's not go fancy. Save the good places for real accomplishments. Rachel chimed in with, LOL true. Buffet. And Mom? She just reacted to both messages with a thumbs up. No one asked what I wanted. No one asked if I had plans. Just like every year, they made the decision, and I went along with it. So Friday rolls around. I show up at this sad little buffet, dim lighting, sticky tables, the kind of place where the sneeze guard is older than most of the staff. Everyone's already seated, halfway through their plates. No decorations. No cake. Just a half-hearted, hey, birthday boy, from my Uncle Frank between bites of lukewarm mac and cheese. I smiled, nodded, sat down, and tried not to take it personally. I've gotten used to fading into the background. But then came the card. It was in a plain white envelope, no handwriting on the front. Inside, a generic, happy birthday message printed in cursive, and someone had scribbled in blue pen underneath. Maybe next year you'll do something worth celebrating. I stared at it. For a second, I thought it was a joke. But the way Nathan laughed, the way Rachel sipped her soda and said, just a little motivation, and the way Mom smiled like it was all so clever, it wasn't a joke. It was how they really saw me, as the one who never quite measured up. I didn't say anything. I just smiled, pulled out my phone, and took a quick photo of the card on the table, the cheap buffet plates in the background, my family all mid-laugh. Then I stood up, placed the card back down, and said, thanks for dinner. No sarcasm. No anger. Just calm. I walked out before anyone could reply. The silence that followed was probably the loudest moment of the night. No one came after me. No one texted. I sat in my car, the photo still on my phone screen, and just stared at it for a long time. Something in me shifted that night. I wasn't angry, not really. I was done. Done being the silent one. Done being their scapegoat for every unspoken tension in the family. I'd spent the last 3 years building something they didn't know about. Freelance contracts, licensing deals, a quiet side project that had taken off behind the scenes. I hadn't told them because I didn't need their validation. But now, I realized I didn't want their presence either. 3 days later, the group chat lit up like a Christmas tree. It started with Rachel. Did anyone else just lose access to Netflix? Then Nathan, and HBO, and Spotify. What is going on? Mom followed with, I can't open the Dropbox link for the family photos anymore. And then finally, Dad, who rarely ever texted, chimed in with, the Wi-Fi went out. Alex, can you check the account? I didn't reply. Not yet. I wanted them to stew a little. They didn't know that every streaming service, every cloud account, every utility bill had been running through my name since 2020, back when Dad got laid off and I quietly offered to help out while they got back on their feet. I never brought it up. I never asked for thanks. But I kept the receipts. And now? I was done playing the background character in a family that only noticed me when something needed fixing. What really lit the fire under them, though, wasn't the Netflix or the power bill. It was the text I sent that night. One message. One photo. The same photo I took at the buffet. No caption. Just the image. It was enough. Nathan replied first. Seriously? Grow up, Alex. Then Mom. Are you really doing this over a birthday card? Rachel added. It was a joke. You're being so dramatic. I didn't answer. I went offline completely. Blocked the group chat, muted their numbers, and went about my day. But that silence? It didn't last long. Because what they hadn't realized yet, what would hit them like a brick the next morning, was that I hadn't just cut off their creature comforts. I'd pulled the plug on something else entirely. By Wednesday morning, I woke up to over 30 missed calls. My phone was vibrating nonstop like it had a personal vendetta. I didn't answer any of them, but I skimmed through the voicemails, each more frantic than the last. Alex, honey, call me back. Your father is trying to get in touch with the bank and nothing's going through. Hey man, I'm not trying to fight or anything, but we're trying to log into the shared drive for the tax stuff. Where is everything? Alex, this is serious. The mortgage payment bounced. Dad says your name is still on the account. What is going on? That one made me pause. They finally realized what they had let slip through their fingers. 3 years ago, when things weren't going so great for the family, when Dad got laid off, when Rachel had to drop out of grad school for a semester, when Nathan lost a chunk of his savings on some can't-miss crypto scheme, I quietly stepped up. I had just landed a major freelance contract with a startup that exploded shortly after. I didn't make a fuss. I didn't demand attention. I just offered to help. I let the bills get rerouted through my accounts. took on the mortgage to save them from default, added everyone to my family plan, covered subscriptions, cloud storage, even the security system, not because they asked, but because I thought that's what family did. And not once, did anyone say thank you. They treated it like a favor I owed them. The moment I removed myself from that invisible scaffolding, their whole structure started to collapse. And the truth is, I didn't do it to hurt them. I did it to protect myself. But the pain? That came as a side effect. Rachel was the first to switch tactics. She sent me a long, guilt-soaked voice note about how we've all made mistakes, and how she didn't mean anything by the card, and how maybe it's time we all sat down and talked like adults. She even threw in a casual, "I'm really proud of you, by the way," like it was something she just forgot to say for the past 5 years. Then Mom texted again. Short and clipped, "You're punishing your entire family over a misunderstanding. This is not how adults behave." That one stung. Not because I believed it, but because it was so familiar. It was her default whenever someone didn't play along with the family script. Minimize the offense. Shift the blame. Paint the reaction as irrational. So I broke my silence with a single reply. "I'm not punishing anyone. I'm just done being invisible until you need something. You all made your feelings clear. Now I'm making mine." No one replied for a full day. Then came Nathan. Not a text. Not a voicemail. He showed up. I was in my apartment, small, quiet, mine. I hadn't told them I moved 6 months ago, mostly because I didn't think anyone would care. But I guess he still had the old address on file from when I helped him set up a tax form. I heard the buzzer, ignored it, then knocking, then louder knocking. Eventually, I opened the door, and there he was, my golden boy brother, dressed like he'd come from work, holding a 6-pack of whatever he assumed I still drank. "Can we talk?" he asked. I leaned against the doorframe. "You're here now. Go ahead." He sighed, shifted his weight awkwardly. "Look, that dinner wasn't meant to be some attack. It was a joke. We all joke around. You never speak up. So how are we supposed to know when something actually bothers you?" That was the moment. That was the moment I realized he didn't get it. None of them did. They had built a reality where my silence was interpreted as weakness, where my absence of complaint was seen as agreement. You're not supposed to treat someone like garbage and then say, "Well, you didn't say anything." "That's not how decency works," I said. He looked surprised, like the idea had never occurred to him. "Okay, fair. So what do you want?" I let the question hang in the air. What did I want? An apology? No, not really. I didn't think I'd believe it if it came now. Respect? Maybe. But respect that had to be forced wasn't real either. What I wanted was distance. Freedom. A life not tethered to a group of people who only remembered my name when a bill was due. So I said, "I don't want anything." That's the point. Nathan's expression shifted, from confusion to something like contempt. "You're seriously just going to ghost your whole family over a birthday card?" I looked him in the eye and said, "No. I'm finally holding you accountable for 3 years of taking me for granted." That card was just the receipt. He stood there for a second, like he wanted to say something else. Then he left the 6-pack on the ground and walked away. I didn't pick it up. And that night, I sat on my couch, finally at peace. Not because I'd gotten revenge. Not because I'd made them suffer. But because, for once, I had chosen myself. I didn't owe anyone anything anymore. Not explanations, not money, not silence. But the fallout? That was just beginning. The next morning, I noticed the voicemail from my father. He rarely called me directly. He was more of a group texts and silent nods kind of man. His voice was gravelly and unusually calm in the message, but I could hear the frustration simmering beneath it. "Alex, your mother's upset. Your sister's in tears. You've made your point. Now be a man and fix this. Family isn't something you quit when it's inconvenient." I listened to it twice. That line, "Be a man and fix this," clanged around in my skull like a warning bell. It wasn't a plea. It wasn't even a negotiation. It was a command, the same one I'd grown up with, dressed up in concern but rooted in control. That's how it always was with Dad. He didn't yell. He didn't hit. But he knew how to remind you who paid the bills, even when he wasn't the one doing it. The part that would have made me laugh, if it wasn't so pathetic, was that he genuinely believed I still owed him. After everything. After covering the mortgage for 3 years, handling Mom's overdue hospital bills when her insurance lapsed, paying off Rachel's busted credit card after she accidentally used the wrong one. I had receipts for everything. I'd been the family backbone, and they only realized it when I stepped away. Later that day, Mom sent me a Facebook message. She'd never used it for anything more than cat videos and reposting church event flyers, so I knew it was intentional. The message was short, clipped, like she was trying to hold onto the last bit of moral high ground she had left. We're struggling. I don't know what you're trying to prove, but it's not too late to make things right. Your father says we could still refinance with your name on the paperwork. If we miss another payment, we could lose the house. Please think about your family. That house, the one I grew up in, the one they remodeled with money they didn't have while I was living in a shoebox apartment fresh out of college. The one I kept afloat when Dad's pride wouldn't let him admit we were drowning. That house had never felt like mine, even when I paid for it. And now they wanted me to come back and save it again? I didn't reply. Instead, I started gathering documents. Not because I was going to help them, but because I wanted to protect myself. You see, I'd never officially signed over financial responsibility. The utilities, the streaming services, even the loan I co-signed for Rachel's short-lived bakery dream, they were all still legally linked to me. If they defaulted, I would take the hit. That's what scared me the most. Not their manipulation, not their entitlement, but how quietly and completely they'd woven their lives into mine without giving me any voice. So I made calls, canceled the co-sign, contacted the electric company, and formally removed myself from the account. Locked down my credit profile. Froze every account that wasn't solely mine. I wasn't just walking away anymore. I was shutting the door behind me. It took 2 days, and when the dust settled, I got one final message that stopped me cold. It was from Grandma. She was the only person in the family who ever treated me like I mattered just because I was me. She used to sneak me chocolate when I got grounded for talking back, and she never forgot a single birthday, even if it was just a card with a hand-drawn doodle and a love you always. But her text hit different. I heard what happened. I wish they saw you the way I do. I don't blame you, Alex, but I do miss you. Please don't let their foolishness harden your heart too much. You're a good man. Don't forget that. I sat with that one for a long time. The next day, I took a drive out to her place, brought her favorite cinnamon rolls and some tulips. We sat on the porch in silence for a while before she said anything. They don't deserve you, she muttered, sipping her tea. But they'll come crawling soon. Pride always bows to desperation eventually. She wasn't wrong. Because the next day, right after I officially cut off the emergency credit line they'd been using behind my back, I got another knock at my door. But this time, it wasn't Nathan. It was Rachel. She looked different, not her usual polished self. No makeup, puffy eyes, hoodie and leggings, holding a plastic grocery bag like it was a peace offering. I brought food, she said, her voice scratchy. And I just wanted to talk. Please. I didn't move. Not at first. I kept my hand on the doorframe, studying her like I didn't know her. Because in a lot of ways, I didn't. Not really. But something in her face, genuine, or maybe just really good desperation, made me step aside. She walked in, placed the bag on the kitchen counter, and looked around like she hadn't expected to actually get this far. Alex, we messed up. Okay. We really messed up. I didn't say anything. Just watched her. She looked down. I'm not going to pretend we didn't say awful things. I laughed at the card. I said things I can't take back. I've been selfish. But I didn't know how much you were carrying for all of us. I didn't know because I didn't want to know. It was easier to believe you were just the quiet one with nothing going on. She looked up, her eyes glassy. But you were the one holding everything together. And now it's all falling apart. And just like that, the room fell quiet. She was right. It was falling apart. And I could feel the moment coming, the one where she'd ask me to fix it. But I wasn't the same person who sat quietly at that buffet table last week. I looked at Rachel for a long time before answering. She fidgeted under my silence, chewing on her bottom lip like she was bracing for a punch that hadn't landed yet. I didn't come here to beg, she said quietly, as if to preempt the accusation. I thought maybe if you understood where we were coming from, you'd reconsider. Where you were coming from? I asked. That I'm not worth celebrating until I do something that fits your idea of success? That I'm the guy you all remember when a bill comes due or the Wi-Fi goes out? She winced. I know. It was awful. But we thought you were fine with it. You never pushed back. You never told us anything. You just helped. Like it didn't matter. I finally sat down. My voice was level, but I could feel the pressure behind it, years of unspoken words now fighting their way out. You know what's funny? I said. I used to think it didn't matter either. I used to think it was just easier to say nothing, to play my part. Let Nathan have his trophies. Let you have your spotlight. Let mom and dad pretend I was just drifting through life with no ambition. I never cared about recognition. But you know what finally hit me? It wasn't that I didn't matter. It was that you all agreed I didn't. And you were comfortable with that. She sat down across from me, her shoulders hunched like she was trying to shrink under the weight of it all. I guess we thought you liked being in the background, she said weakly. Like, you were just different. No, I replied. I was made the background. Every time I did something worthwhile, it was brushed aside or rebranded as luck. Every quiet success got drowned out by one of Nathan's promotions or your next big trip. I was the emotional support wall. And when you all built your house on me, you never once looked down to see who was holding it up. I stood and walked to the counter, picking up the bag she brought. Inside was takeout from my favorite Thai place, one I'd mentioned offhand in a text over a year ago. It was the first time anyone in the family had remembered something so specific about me. I appreciate this, I said, setting the bag back down. But a bag of curry doesn't fix years of being treated like I don't count. I know, she said quickly. I know it doesn't. But it's not supposed to fix anything. It's just a start. I sighed and ran a hand through my hair. Do you remember when I helped you with your bakery? I asked. Her eyes flickered. Yeah. Do you know how many loans I had to defer to front that $15,000? She swallowed hard. No, I didn't. Of course you didn't. Because you never asked. No one ever did. She looked at me with something like shame, but also, maybe for the first time, real understanding. You want me to come back, I said. To the group chat, to the bills, to the support system you all relied on. But you never once asked me how I was doing. You never once treated me like someone who had his own life, his own responsibilities, his own goals. You want the version of me that says yes and smiles while you laugh in my face. I don't, she said quickly. I swear I don't. I want this version. The one who finally tells us the truth. For a moment, I believed her. But that wasn't enough anymore. I'm not coming back, I said quietly. Her eyes widened. Alex, I'm done being your safety net. I've cut off every shared service. Removed my name from everything. You'll have to figure out your own bills. Rebuild your own credit. I'm not doing it for you. She looked like she wanted to argue, but couldn't. I don't hate you, I continued. I'm not doing this to punish you. But I'm not going to let you keep using me, either. I deserve more than pity and guilt-tripped loyalty. I deserve respect. I respect you, she whispered. Then let me go, I said. Respect me enough to let me walk away. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded slowly. Will you ever come back? She asked. I shook my head. Not until I'm treated like someone you actually want in your life. Not just someone you need. She stood. Her hands were shaking as she picked up the bag of food. She held it out to me. Keep it, she said. Even if you don't want to see us again, just eat something. Please. I took it. That was the only thing I accepted. When she left, I locked the door behind her. And for the first time in years, I felt something lift off my shoulders. The silence in the apartment was no longer hollow, it was peaceful. I spent the next few weeks in near-complete solitude. No group chats. No frantic calls. No obligations pulling me in every direction but my own. I used the time to build my life, something just for me. I accepted a new remote contract with a tech firm in Sweden, paid off the last of my deferred loans, even booked a solo trip to Kyoto, something I'd wanted to do since college. It took them a while to realize I wasn't bluffing. Nathan sent one last message. You've made your point. But don't forget who helped you get where you are. I didn't reply. I just screenshotted the message and archived it in a folder I now called Noise. Mom sent a birthday card the following year. No jokes. Just a simple handwritten note. I'm sorry. I miss you. Love, Mom. I didn't respond to that either. Not out of bitterness, but because I learned something vital. You can forgive people without giving them access to hurt you again. 6 months later, I got a letter in the mail. From Grandma. Inside was a small, square photograph of the two of us on her porch, tulips in her lap, cinnamon roll in hand. She'd written on the back in her wobbly handwriting. They're learning. Slowly. But you don't owe them your peace. Keep going. I'm proud of you. That one, I framed. Now, I live in a sunlit apartment in Stockholm. I work with a brilliant, small team. I walk to a nearby lake every morning with my coffee, and I've started painting again. I still don't make noise about my success. I don't post humble brags or drop subtle hints in group threads, because I no longer need them to see me to feel seen. I see myself, and that's enough.